Chapter 1307. Huang Song felt that the amount of sighs he had sighed recently was equal to the amount he had sighed for half his life. He was so worried that he was about to go bald. Cheng Jing said, Lu Shi has placed a large number of troops in Wanzhou. It will be very difficult for Huaijie to break through. Please wait patiently, my lord. Huang Song said, I know that too. Wanzhou was Jiang Pingji's nest. Although she was a wanderer, she still valued her nest very much. Otherwise, when she came back, she would find that her nest had been destroyed. Wouldn't that be a pain in the ass? If Wei Xiai knew what these two people were thinking, he would probably laugh without saying a word. His Majesty in his previous life was really like this. The front line was fighting so hard that his nest was almost destroyed by Qiguan Rang. If it were not for the fact that she had returned in time, and that Qiguan Rang's old master was a headstrong fool, she would not have been able to keep her lair. Even so, she still lost a lot of territory. Fuming puffer. JPG, in this life, Jiang Pingji asked Qiguan Rang to guard the base while she led her troops to war. Was this another form of retribution cycle? How strong was Qiguan Rang's defense? Back then, when Jiang Pingji had just taken over Xiangyang district, she was short of troops. The Tsingy army sent thousands of troops to attack Xiangyang district. Qiguan Rang did not let the Tsingy army gain any advantage, even though the city was empty. It had been 6 or 7 years since that incident, and Qiguan Rang had become more mature than before. In comparison, Feng Zhu was slightly younger. His experience was slightly inferior to the astute Qiguan Rang, but the gap was not huge. In a situation where the two of them were not too far apart in terms of ability, the soldiers under the tent played a decisive role in the outcome of the battle. Of the two sides, one was attacking while the other was defending. The defensive side's combat quality was far better than the attacking side. Qiguan Rang also firmly guarded the pass of Wanzhou, blocking all the routes that Feng Zhu could launch a sneak attack on. He sent troops to guard it strictly, so that the enemy could not advance an inch. He had changed his usual treacherous style. His defense was steady. No matter what tricks Feng Zhu used, Qiguan Rang did not budge. Feng Zhu tricked his troops. Qiguan Rang was indifferent. He did not fall for it at all. Feng Zhu would send his troops to fight head-on? That was good. The difference in quality between the two sides was too great. If the enemy came, they would only be asking for trouble. Feng Zhu had tried other methods, but Qiguan Rang had countered every move he made. The entire defense line of Wanzhou had been turned into an airtight iron bucket by this person. Feng Zhu had been shut out for several months in a row. Attacking by force didn't work. Scheming didn't work. Luring troops out also didn't work. It was too difficult. Fortunately, it was Feng Zhu. If it were someone else with less patience, they would have flipped the table and started cursing. Feng Zhu received news that his elder brother Feng Gui had stayed at the front lines for a short period of time. What is Big Brother doing at the front line? Feng Zhu couldn't help but wonder. Could it be Big Brother is Lu Shi? At the thought of this possibility, Feng Zhu subconsciously shook his head in denial. Based on the Feng family's way of doing things, it was impossible for Big Brother Feng Gui to become an official now. Because of this matter, he tossed and turned restlessly. Unexpectedly, Feng Gui stayed at the front line for 2 days before leaving. Feng Zhu. What was Qiguan Rang up to? After asking around, Feng Zhu finally found out why Feng Gui had appeared at the front lines. It was because of a letter. This letter was said to be written by Feng Gui to his third brother Feng Zhu. The contents of the letter indicated that he was willing to lead the Feng family to pledge allegiance to Huang Song and work together to help Huang Song succeed. Feng Zhu had come to the front lines for no other reason than to explain and prove his innocence to Qiguan Rang. Feng Zhu was stunned. He wasn't stupid. How could he secretly persuade his elder brother to lead the Feng family to pledge allegiance to Huang Song? If he really did that, his elder brother would be the first to expel him from the family and sell him to Qiguan Rang. Feng Zhu was a rebel, but he wasn't someone who wouldn't recognize his own family. How could he persuade his family to betray Jiang Pingji when Huang Song was obviously at a disadvantage? His family wouldn't agree to it. This was an extremely risky matter. Who would be willing to take the risk? Feng Zhu's actions would harm the entire Feng family. Therefore, The existence of this letter was rather curious. Could this conspiracy theory be a self-directed act by Qiguan Rang to test the Feng family's attitude and stance? Feng Zhu didn't know the complicated plot of Takshu and Lu Shi's family. Therefore, his conspiracy theory was the most logical. This Qiguan Rang is very evil. Qiguan Rang. He had inexplicably become a scapegoat. As time passed, the day of the autumn harvest was getting closer and closer. There was still no breakthrough on Feng Zhu's side. His most successful attempt was to break through the city gate. Unfortunately, the enemy's soldiers were not afraid of death. They used their flesh and blood to resist the attack, which bought them some time. Hundreds of war chariots blocked the gate. Seeing this, Feng Zhu had no other reaction other than to sigh. Looking at his own troops, their morale fluctuated. Looking at the enemy's troops, even though the defense line was about to be broken, they didn't have the intention to escape or retreat. Instead, they became braver as they fought. Feng Zhu had an unprecedented strong thought. It was infuriating to compare oneself with others. He really wanted to pull these people back and train them again. It was inconvenient to send letters at the front lines. After a few twists and turns, Qiguan Rang's secret letter still reached Jiang Pingji's hands. She checked if there were any traces of the seal being opened. Then, she opened the secret letter and took out the letter inside. Takshu. Jiang Pingji read the contents of the letter quickly. Takshu's appearance, which she hadn't seen for many years, appeared in her mind. Back then, she noticed that Takshu was acting strangely. She simply kept Takshu under her eyes and monitored her. Then, she sent her back to Lu Shi's side. Lu Shi also acted as a matchmaker for Takshu. He let her marry into a well-off family. To put it bluntly, Takshu was just an ordinary person. She was a chess piece manipulated by the main system through Lu Shi's hands. No matter what, she had taken care of Lu Shi and Jiang Pingji for many years. As long as she didn't commit an unforgivable crime, Jiang Pingji was willing to let her go and let her die of old age. Unexpectedly, Takshu still courted death and ran out. She was really stubborn. Some disgust flashed in Jiang Pingji's eyes. If it weren't for Qiguan Rang, Takshu's letter would have been leaked. Not only would it have driven a wedge between her and the Feng family, but it would also have caused her to go against Lu Shi in advance. At the same time, the map that Takshu had smuggled out of would have caused a devastating blow to the defense line in Wanzhou. She burned the letter after reading it. Just as the letter was burned to ashes, someone outside reported that Wei Xi had arrived. Let Zixiao come in. Wei Xi was holding a food box in his hand. Jiang Pingji only then remembered that it was time for dinner. What did you burn, my lord? Wei Xi smelled the strange smell of burnt paper in the air and asked casually. Jiang Pingji said, when Zheng sent a secret report from the front lines. Wei Xi glanced at Jiang Pingji's expression. She looked gloomier than usual. He had expected it. Could it be that Wanzhou? Jiang Pingji shook her head. No, it's not about the war. Wei Xi didn't ask any more questions after hearing that. He took out the food box. There was a vegetable, a meat dish, and a soup. At the bottom shelf was a large pot of freshly cooked white rice. My lord, eat it while it's hot. Jiang Pingji began to eat. Her irritation subsided with the sense of fullness produced by her stomach. Zixiao's culinary skills are really getting better and better. It's just that there are fewer dishes, so it doesn't go well with the rice. Wei Xi said, my lord often says that I'm a feast for the eyes. Don't tell me that I'm not as good as those dishes? Jiang Pingji froze in the middle of eating. Chapter 1308. The salted fishes kept cheering for Wei Xi, double-clicking 666, my friend. Other people either treated the streamer as a brother or a man. But Wei Xi dared to face the man head-on. He was simply a role model in the brave world. In the past, she had always felt that Wei Xi was too introverted and delicate. Now that she had seen him, he was amazing. His foundation in flirting with girls was very deep. The single dogs were unhappy that they were being fed dog food, even though they were watching a live broadcast. Xingyue Tianyan. Kick this pot of sour dog food full of love, handsome lowly. The single dog rejected the dog food and threw it back. Xiyu. I was caught off guard by a mouthful of dog food. Baby refuses to accept this dog food. Zuixian. Ha ha ha, counterattack from the frog. Has the host been flirted with by the traveling frog? The salted fishes who were watching the commotion giggled, but the older salted fishes who insisted on being single felt threatened. Little gong. No. Don't you think that the host and Beauty Ci have been flirting with each other too frequently recently? What frequency was that in the past? Rain after a long drought. If not for the fact that the streamer would occasionally talk about Wei Ci, they would have suspected that the streamer and Wei Ci were already dead. What kind of frequency was that? Just like high school students, there would be a small test every 3 days, a big test every 5 days, and a monthly test every month. Yuzishu. Sigh. The streamer is no longer the single dog who is single with us. You have been expelled by the Single Dog Alliance. Yaoing Yin. Even frogs know how to flirt. There's no place for single dogs in this world anymore. Jiang Pingji couldn't help but laugh. Fortunately, she swallowed the mouthful of rice in her mouth, otherwise, she would have lost her composure. Wei Ci readily took the empty bowl that she handed to him, and filled it to the brim. He even pressed the bowl down a little. Jiang Pingji's appetite was several times that of an average adult man. Wei Ci was already used to it. He was not worried that she would eat too much. Instead, he was worried that she would not be full. In his previous life, His Majesty had a serious stomach disease. The imperial doctor said that it was caused by a long-term improper diet. In this life, he had to keep a close eye on him. He could not allow this person to act recklessly. What is my lord laughing at? Wei Ci asked. Jiang Pingji smiled and said, in the past, I always felt that Zixiao was a little dull and passive. Now that you've let go of yourself, it's really an eye-opener. Wei Ci smiled. It also depended on who the target was. Jiang Pingji covered her eyes with both of her hands. Her lips curled up slightly as she teased him. Zixiao, don't laugh. I feel uncomfortable every time you seduce me. Wei Ci's smile froze. His jade-like skin was stained with a suspicious redness. In terms of boldness, he was still far behind Jiang Pingji. The audience in the live broadcast room exploded. One by one, they were so angry that they turned into pufferfish, turning their grief and indignation into the power of ridicule. The bullet screen flooded the entire screen. Couldn't they just watch the live broadcast properly? Couldn't they wait until the end of the live broadcast to tease each other and feed each other dog food? Jiang Pingji refused. Who asked the salted fish in the streaming room to always say that Zixiao was their brain woman? She wanted to show them who Wei Zixiao belonged to. The idle spectators were left speechless. Jiang Pingji closed the streaming room on time and wrote a reply to Qiguan Rang. She carefully reminded him of the things he needed to pay attention to. Takshu was just a useless chess piece. The main system had thrown her out just to give it a try. If she succeeded, Jiang Pingji's hegemony would definitely be dealt a blow, and her progress would be temporarily halted. If she failed, she would just be sacrificing a dispensable chess piece. The main system would still be well hidden. Poor Takshu was still clueless. Thinking of Qiguan Rang's description of Takshu's appearance and demeanor, Jiang Pingji felt even more disgusted with the main system. Even if she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, she could guess what method the main system had used to bewitch Takshu and make her work for it step by step. Someone, send this secret letter to military advisor Qiguan of Wanzhou as soon as possible. The sooner the better. Jiang Pingji had asked Wen Zheng to guard Wanzhou, not because she was worried that he couldn't withstand the hardships of marching troops. Qiguan Rang was her confidant and confidant. There were some things that she didn't even tell Wei Ci, but Qiguan Rang was in the know. It wasn't that she didn't trust Wei Ci. It was just that Wei Ci and Qiguan Rang had different personalities. The latter was more suitable to do this. Moreover, Wanzhou seemed peaceful, but in fact, there were hidden thieves and hidden dangers. She needed Qiguan Rang to help her keep an eye on them. After she dealt with Huang Song and recuperated for a while, she would send troops to Nansheng. The situation in the world was basically under her control. She didn't believe that the main system, who was hiding behind the scenes and waiting to reap the benefits, would be able to endure it. As the autumn harvest approached, the hot weather became cooler. Jiang Pingji sent scouts to investigate everywhere, keeping a close eye on the situation of the fertile fields. Huang Song was also on guard against a formidable enemy, An invisible tension hovered between the two armies. At this sensitive moment, an unexpected person appeared in front of Jiang Pengji. On this day, she had nothing to do, so she led the troops to the nearby mountains for an autumn hunt. The prey was the fattest at this time of year. The food in the army wasn't good enough, but she didn't give herself any special privileges. She ate whatever the ordinary soldiers ate. She was bland and bland. Even with a beauty like Wei Ci watching her eat, Jiang Pengji lamented that there was too little food recently. Thinking that it was almost the autumn harvest, and it was a good time for hunting, she wanted to lead the troops out to hunt. Everyone naturally stopped her. Wasn't she afraid of being ambushed and killed by the enemy if she went out to hunt at this time? Jiang Pengji raised her hands and promised, "I won't go far. I'll only hunt in the forest near the camp. I'll hunt some small animals. I won't touch wild boars, wild bears, jackals, wolves, tigers, or leopards. I'll also go out with more than 100 guards. If I encounter anything wrong, I'll come back immediately." After much persuasion, Wei Ci and the others finally relented. Jiang Pengji didn't wait for them to go back on their words. She whistled for Little White, jumped onto the horse and ran. "I've been too bored recently. I finally found a chance to get some fresh air." Jiang Pengji's words were directed at the audience in the streaming room. Qin Gong, who came along, misunderstood and thought that she was talking to him. Qin Gong held it in for a long time before he squeezed out a sentence. He stiffly interceded for the military counselors and generals. "The gentlemen are also worried about the Lord." Salted Fish in the streaming room answered with a smile. "Rusu Luo Mao. Qin Gong is young, so he still doesn't understand the streamer's combat power. If the streamer is released from prison, the unlucky ones will be others." Qingqing Jiha Yi. Jiang Pengji nicknamed Jiang Ritian in the martial world. She's a woman who can do whatever she wants. Qin Gong is too young. Pia Pia Wiang. Let me say something inappropriate. I suddenly remembered that a certain prince was also a hunting enthusiast. When he went hunting, he didn't bring anyone with him. In the end, he was assassinated by Su Gong's right-hand man with a poisonous arrow. Streamer, don't raise this flag. You have more enemies than a prince. Rather won't take a postgraduate exam. If the streamer was assassinated by someone with a poisonous arrow, then the plot would be really amazing. Jiang Pengji glanced at the bullet screen and tilted her head to look at Qin Gong with a smile. "What are you worried about? Are you worried that I'll be assassinated by a poisonous arrow that suddenly shoots out from the forest?" Chapter 1309. Look at how scared you are. I won't bully you anymore. Jiang Pengji smiled. You've all been plotted against, but I'm still alive and kicking. She didn't use her mental strength to deal with ordinary people, but it didn't mean that she wouldn't use it for her own benefit. She would know anyone who stepped into her mental strength field. She had a range of 10 miles, and this was a distance that she deliberately reduced. Who could shoot arrows from so far away? Stabbing people in the dark? There was no such thing. Qin Gong wiped the sweat off his forehead and said seriously, "My lord, my father used to say that the gods are watching over us. Some things can't be said casually. It can easily come true. My lord will naturally live a long life. But there are evil spirits hiding in the dark waiting for an opportunity to cause trouble." Jiang Pengji teased. "Feng Jing still believes in this?" Qin Gong told the truth. "I'd rather believe it than not." Jiang Pengji didn't comment, but she also knew that these little princesses were relatively timid, so she didn't want to scare them. In her mental strength field, all living creatures had nowhere to hide. Naturally, she would hunt accurately. She completely forgot her previous promise to everyone. She wouldn't touch wild boars, wild bears, or jackals, tigers, and leopards. She specifically picked those fierce ones. The big guy took 4 nests of wild boars. A family should be neat. The big wild boar and the small suckling pig were all graciously accepted. Qin Gong was stunned. He didn't know whether to say that his lord's archery skills were superb, or that she was extremely lucky. The other guards could only follow behind Jiang Pengji and act as porters to carry the prey. Looking at Jiang Pengji's excited look, it seemed that she was going to plunder the entire mountain. Jiang Pengji hunted another 2 big bugs with white brows and eyes. The 2 big bugs, one male and one female, had just eaten and drunk their fill. They lay down and dozed off beside the skeletons of their prey. They woke up when they heard the movement. Qin Gong was about to say that the big bugs were dangerous, but his lord pointed at the fur of the big bugs. The quality of this fur is quite good. We can peel it off and make a cloak. We don't need rabbit fur for our winter cloaks this year. Qin Gong did not know that when Jiang Pingji was in Langya County, others saw that she was mighty and bold. She did not show any mercy when she hunted the big worms. They compared her to a brave general of the previous dynasty and gave her the nickname, chasing the tiger across the ravine. She ran into the tiger, so she was definitely not the one who escaped. Animals were more sensitive to smells than humans. They stared at Jiang Pingji and soon wanted to retreat. Qin Gong watched in a daze as the two white-fronted worms turned around and ran. His lord chased after them without a word. Qin Gong. He was absolutely sure that the military counselors did not need to worry about his lord. Instead, they should worry about the animals in the forest. When the lord came, the animals in this area would have to be sterilized. Before Qin Gong and his men could catch up, they heard the shrill roars of the two white-fronted insects, and soon, there was no more movement. Everyone watched as Jiang Pingji carried a large worm in one hand. Her long tiger tail and half of her body were dragged on the ground. Jiang Pingji shouted with a natural expression, "Come here and give me a hand. Don't ruin this good tiger skin. I need to give it to someone else." Qin Gong. Ever since Qin Gong could draw a half-stone short bow when he was 7 or 8 years old, his father and two brothers often took him out to hunt. His father and brothers were hunting enthusiasts. Qin Gong had seen all kinds of hunting postures, but he had never seen his lord's style. He glanced at the dead bodies of the two large worms and immediately understood how they died. His lord had crushed them to death with her bare hands. Jiang Pingji saw that he was in a daze and teased, "Do you want the tiger penis?" Qin Gong said, "No, my lord, you keep it to nourish your body." Jiang Pingji could not help but say, "That is an aphrodisiac. What's the use of eating it?" Qin Gong blinked his eyes in confusion. After a while, he realized that his lord was a woman. How could she say the words, "Do you want the tiger penis," so naturally? He vaguely thought that she was a friend of the same sex joking with him. Jiang Pingji carried the entire team. Most of the prey was hunted by her. Qin Gong's spoils of war were only pitiful musk deer and wild rabbits. Qin Gong was already so pitiful. Needless to say, the other guards were even more pitiful. The group of people carried their prey back to the military camp, as if they were robbing a forest. "Today we'll make meat dishes. Skin the two large worms. Send the bones and meat to the kitchen to be boiled into meat soup for the soldiers." The weight of the two large worms was considerable. Ordinary soldiers could still drink the meat soup and have a taste of it. Jiang Pingji had too much prey. She only took a portion of it. Most of it was given to the soldiers, and a portion was given to the little princesses. "Where are Zixiao and the rest?" Jiang Pingji asked casually. A deputy general replied, "My lord, there are envoys from Nansheng. The military counselor is receiving them." "Envoys from Nansheng?" Her mouth was quite vicious. She said bluntly, "Isn't Nansheng long gone? Where did the envoys come from?" The deputy general said, "I heard that they are envoys from Nansheng's in Shui." Not long after Jiang Pingji left to hunt, the patrolling scouts found a group of suspicious people and immediately stopped them. The other party took out the official diplomatic documents. The scouts did not dare to neglect them. They immediately brought them back and reported the matter to Wei Ci and the rest. "And Shui, I have some impression. What's the name of the envoy? What's the purpose of their visit?" The deputy general shook his head. He still did not know. Jiang Pingji simply spread out her spiritual force field, which allowed her to discover a rather strange mass of spiritual energy. In her spiritual force field, everyone turned into a mass of spiritual energy. Through the mass of energy, she could roughly determine the mental state of the other party. Most people were complete and mellow, but that person was different. His mental state was extremely active and unstable, and there was a tendency for him to split. Jiang Pingji immediately guessed the identity of the envoy. She smiled and said, "Hua Yuan tricked Huang Song. Why didn't he go back to Shui's lair to hide and lay low for a while?" How dare he swagger around and parade around the city? Is he too confident in himself? Or does he not want to live? She guessed correctly. The envoy was none other than Enchui's strategist, Hua Yuan. He was the man who had tricked millions of dawn of grain in Qinzhou without bloodshed. When Wei Xi heard that Hua Yuan had come to visit, he was also surprised. Because the people and matters in this life were different from the previous one, Wei Xi reacted quickly. He prepared to receive the envoy group that Hua Yuan had brought. He also wanted to test Hua Yuan's intentions. This fellow couldn't be unsatisfied after tricking Huang Song. Would he turn around and trick his lord? Wei Xi thought that he would never see Hua Yuan again in this life. He did not expect the two of them to reunite under such circumstances. After all, they were colleagues in the previous life. Wei Xi was more familiar with the states of Hua Yuan's personalities. He could determine which personality. It was just by looking at the other person's appearance. The Hua Yuan in front of him was dressed very cleanly. He looked a few years younger than his actual age. His black hair was tied up with an exquisite crown. There was a faint scent of incense wafting from his body. It smelled good but was not cloying. His clothes were neat and tidy. The materials and workmanship were very particular. Chapter 13:10. The Hua Yuan that Yuan Xian saw was run down and reeked of alcohol. He couldn't even use a cloth to tie his hair, and could only use a straw rope. His clothes were dirty, smelly and ill-fitting. The lapels of his shirt were loose, revealing his chest. One could not help but suspect that he was a refugee. If the Hua Yuan that Yuan Xian saw was a rundown vagrant, the Hua Yuan that Wei Xi saw was a well-behaved son of an aristocratic family. Logically speaking, it should be Hua Yuan's primary personality. As far as Wei Xi knew, Hua Yuan's personality was somewhat complicated. He could act in a family drama all by himself. Hua Yuan himself, Hua Yuan's elder brother, who tricked Yuan Xian, Hua Yuan's deceased wife's lover, father, mother. In addition to these messy personalities, there was also a rarely seen person hidden in his body that was no less threatening than his second personality. It was the person in front of him. Hua Yuan's primary personality was a rather elegant son of an aristocratic family. Although he was weak and incompetent, his appearance was very deceiving. But the person in front of him was different. He had a fierce look in his eyes, and always gave people an indescribable sense of oppression. Wei Xi could recognize him at a glance, because he had left too deep an impression on him in his previous life. This person was also the core force that supported Enchui in slaughtering 630,000 people from the four factions of Nanman. Wei Xi was naturally in opposition. In order to persuade Enchui, he persuaded him several times. The last time, he even argued with Hua Yuan. In terms of eloquence, Wei Xi naturally won, but he greatly underestimated the danger of Hua Yuan's personality. The personality in front of him rarely appeared. He called himself the son of General Huban Guchun. His appearance also came without warning. That time, Wei Xi and Hua Yuan parted on bad terms. He was about to leave the government office when someone suddenly covered his mouth and nose and dragged him into the side hall. That was the first time Wei Xi encountered Hua Yuan's personality. The other party was extremely strong. No matter how Wei Xi struggled, he could not break free. His neck was violently strangled. Wei Xi thought he was going to die there. Fortunately, a servant passed by and Wei Xi desperately made some noise. "Who's there?" The servant who was cleaning asked in surprise, and pretended to come in to check. Hua Yuan released the hand that was strangling Wei Xi's neck. Before he left with a cold gaze that made people shudder. "Count yourself lucky. Anyone who stands in the way of my revenge against the South deserves to die. If you want to live, don't block my way." At that time, Wei Xi was half dead from being strangled. He was suffering from a severe lack of oxygen, and his eyeballs were so bloodshot that they were about to pop out of their sockets. He looked extremely terrifying. "Who are you?" Wei Xi was very sure that he had never seen Hua Yuan like this. Gulin, who was green. Wei Xi spent a lot of time looking for information about this person, until one day, he heard Bai Ning mention his master, Guchun. In the last years of Nansheng, General Hu Bin Guchun went on a punitive expedition against the four factions of Nanman. He made many military achievements and was regarded as the Nanshan god of war. Although Guchun's meritorious service shocked the emperor, she was loyal and devoted to the emperor. She helped the emperor eliminate many enemies that were an eyesore, and thus offended many nobles and aristocratic families. Some people instigated the relationship between the emperor and Guchun. The emperor was not a wise ruler who could distinguish between loyalty and treachery, so he more or less became suspicious. The political enemies framed Guchun, using the excuse of delaying the reinforcements and the supply of supplies, causing Guchun to be ambushed by the four factions of Nanman. Through Bai Ning, Wei Xiai found out that Guchun did not die. He was lucky enough to escape and become a beggar. Guchun escaped death, but his family was not so lucky. Instead, they were accused of groundless crimes. On the way, Guchun's family was ambushed by the barbarians of the four factions of Nanman and died a miserable death. Hearing this news, Guchun was disheartened and became a beggar. In the end, he met the young Bai Ning and received his financial support. Bai Ning learned Guchun's skills and treated him like a father. After Guchun died of illness, he even organized the funeral for the old man. This Gulin was Guchun's eldest son. In the year of the incident, Gulin had just been married for 2 years, and his wife gave birth to a big fat boy. Gulin did not have time to experience the peaceful life of a family before his whole family died, tragically in the hands of the Nanman. Hua Yuan's personality called himself Gulin, so his hatred for the Nanman made sense. Wei Xiai had only seen Gulin twice in his previous life. The first time was when he almost choked Wei Xiai to death, and the second time was when Chui slaughtered more than 638,000 Nanman people. Gulin had people bring over the 1-year-old children of the Nanman tribes and threw them to the ground with his own hands. Wei Xiai was about to go mad when he saw the tragic scene. He still remembered the way Gulin laughed as he threw the children. If the children did not die, he would have stepped on them. Not long after the four factions of Nanman were destroyed, Chui's power declined greatly. His line of defense was empty, and His Majesty sent troops south to take advantage of the situation. Chui committed suicide, and Hua Yuan disappeared. Wei Xiai secretly searched for him, and later found him in Nanxing Ningzhou. At that time, Hua Yuan had become a complete lunatic. He did not notice when the children in the nearby villages played with and bullied him. The villagers nearby pitied him and occasionally gave him some money. However, the naughty children went too far. Not only did they give Hua Yuan rotten eggs, dead rats, cockroaches and bedbugs, but they also gave him pig dung as food. The silly Hua Yuan did not know anything and thought it was food, so he ate it. When the children saw him eat it, they laughed and threw stones at him. Wei Xiai could not bear to see this and wanted to take care of Hua Yuan. Unexpectedly, Hua Yuan's body was found the next day, dead in front of his deceased parents' grave. Of course, that was all history from his previous life. Hua Yuan in this life was an enemy, and so was Gulin in front of him. Wei Xiai received Hua Yuan as if nothing had happened, and tested him without batting an eyelid. If it was Hua Yuan, he could get some information out of him, but the personality that had appeared was Gulin. Gulin was not good with words and looked very quiet. The companions who had come with Gulin also noticed the abnormality and suddenly felt like they were sitting on pins and needles. They were afraid of Hua Yuan, because Hua Yuan was a demon who could change his personality at any time. In the eyes of ordinary people, he was like a ghost. However, Chui valued Hua Yuan, and they could not resist. Wei Xi's expression did not change, but he was surprised at Gulin's motive. Gulin had first appeared because Wei Xiai had stopped Chui from slaughtering the four factions of Nanman. The second time was to take revenge by throwing the children. What about this time? What was the reason this time? Little did they know that Gulin's personality was the son of a tiger general, and he was most familiar with the military camp. People with split personalities had unusually active and unstable mental energy, which also caused their mental perception of the outside world to increase. The military camp was Jiang Pingji's territory, and the mental aura that she left behind stimulated Hua Yuan's mind. Gulin had appeared out of self-defense, Hua Yuan's split personality was a little different. The main personality did not know the movements of the other personalities, but the other personalities knew the main personality. Ge Lin knew that Hua Yuan had come as a messenger, but he was not good with words, so he could not complete the mission on Hua Yuan's behalf. Chapter 13:11. I wonder when Lord Lanting will be back. Ge Lin felt uncomfortable. He didn't like staying there, as if there were countless eyes staring at him. Wei Xi said, "My lord is out hunting. It's about time he's back. If you're in a hurry, I'll ask around for you." Han Yu was still busy. Xie Zhe and Jiang Nongqin were training the soldiers, and Yang Si was nowhere to be found. Wei Xi was about to send someone to pass the message when Ge Chun shuddered. His eyes were filled with fear as he stared at the exit of the tent. Before he could figure it out, he heard familiar footsteps coming from afar. It seemed to be accompanied by an invigorating vitality. "Zixiao, I heard there's a delegation visiting?" Ge Chun heard the voice before he saw the person. He was like a beast that had encountered a strong enemy. His back was drenched in cold sweat. "Greetings, my lord." Wei Xi stood up and bowed. Ge Chun also bowed. "Greetings, Lord Lanting." Jiang Pingji knew who it was at first glance. After all, the mental state of a person with a split personality was too obvious. She couldn't ignore it even if she wanted to. "This is..." Wei Xi took the initiative to introduce Jiang Pingji. Jiang Pingji walked to the seat of honor and sat down. She asked Ge Chun casually, "What did Shui send you here for?" Ge Chun froze on the spot. He was born into a family of generals. He didn't like small talk. It was better to leave it to the professionals. Jiang Pingji clearly saw that Hua Yuan's mental state was active again. Several mental groups were squeezing each other, showing signs of splitting again. After a while, Jiang Pingji knew that Hua Yuan's personality had changed. His eyes were not as serious as before. Instead, they were frivolous. His standing posture was not as straight and strong as before. He bowed respectfully to Jiang Pingji and said a lot of formulaic things. Jiang Pingji's eyes lit up. Hua Yuan's personality disorder was interesting. He could switch personalities seamlessly. This personality was the culprit that made Yuan Qin cry. Hua Yuan's elder brother. Ge Chun finally squeezed back and kicked Hua Yuan's second personality out. A straightforward person doesn't beat around the bush. Just tell me what Shui wants. Jiang Pingji listened for a while, then waved her hand disinterestedly. She stared at Hua Yuan and said bluntly, "I've heard of your heroic deeds in Qinzhou. Shui got this huge sum of money for nothing. Don't tell me you're still poor?" Hua Yuan was not embarrassed. He said righteously, "Duke of Lanting, you're wrong." Jiang Pingji asked, "What did I say wrong?" Hua Yuan said, "If I hadn't taken the millions of grains stored in Qinzhou, how could the Duke of Lanting have gotten them so easily? So Shui feels that this deal is a loss and wants me to pay for the labor." Jiang Pingji teased him with a smile. "Master Hua Yuan came all the way here to help me succeed. This is indeed a favor. What does Shui want?" Jiang Pingji was a straightforward person. She did not have the patience to explain things clearly in a few words. She had to use a long speech to probe. Shui had not sent Hua Yuan over to exchange pleasantries. There had to be a reason. If an ordinary person had been questioned by Jiang Pingji so rudely, they would have blushed and covered their faces in embarrassment. It was not shyness, it was awkwardness. However, Hua Yuan was a thick-skinned person who was not ashamed but proud of it. He turned a deaf ear to Jiang Pingji's overt and covert sarcasm. "The Duke of Lanting is as straightforward as people say," Hua Yuan said. Hua Yuan said, "My master and the Duke of Lanting are old friends. My master has returned to his homeland many years ago. Even now, he does not forget the Duke of Lanting's help and life-saving grace. How can the matter in Qinzhou be enough to make up for this favor?" Jiang Pingji listened quietly. When these literati talked, they were like pigs wearing bras. People who didn't know better would think that Shui was on good terms with her. Shui would always remember her life-saving grace? Nonsense. She would rather believe that Zixiao would offer himself to sleep with her tonight than believe that. Hua Yuan was good at making friends, but Jiang Pingji did not fall for it. She laughed. "So you helped me for nothing? You really don't want anything in return?" Hua Yuan said to himself, The Duke of Lanting was indeed not an ordinary person. He was straightforward and harder to deal with than others. It's my duty to help my allies. Moreover, you saved my master's life. Jiang Pingji could roughly guess Hua Yuan's intentions. If she was not mistaken, it should be to make friends and form an alliance. If he really did not want anything in return, why would Hua Yuan come all the way here? Did he really think that Enchui's territory was close to hers? Only a fool would do this business, if he could not even earn back the travel expenses, after spending so much effort to come here. Enchui was obviously not a fool, and neither was Hua Yuan. Jiang Pingji gave him a way out. So Hua Yuan took the opportunity to reveal his true intentions. Just as she thought, the two families formed an alliance to help each other. Jiang Pingji teased, Enchui is really not afraid. Hua Yuan did not understand. What do you mean, Duke of Lanting? Jiang Pingji said, I once formed an alliance with Xan Zhao, Bogeo and Zhengza. Does Duo she also want to form an alliance with me? Hua Yuan's smile stiffened. Xan Zhao was Su Bei, Jiang Pingji's former ally. In the end, she attacked Shanwu City, and Su Bei burned himself to death. Bogeo was Huang Song, Jiang Pingji's former ally. They were currently at loggerheads, and it was estimated that he would not survive the winter. Zhengza was Yang Tao, Jiang Pingji's current ally. They were not at loggerheads yet, but when Huang Song knelt down, she would definitely snatch Zhangzhou from Yang Tao's hands. The countdown to the loggerheads was not far. Now that Enchui had come to form an alliance with her, was this a ticket to the next loggerheads? As a maniac with multiple split personalities, for the first time, Hua Yuan felt that he was a normal person, and Jiang Pingji was more like a maniac. Hua Yuan pretended not to understand Jiang Pingji's hint. He smiled and said, Those who form an alliance with the Duke of Lanting are all heroes of the age. If my lord has this honor, I would naturally be more than happy to do so. If the two families form an alliance and help each other, when the day comes for my lord to expel the southern barbarians, the Duke of Lanting will reside in Dongqing, and my lord will reside in Nansheng. The two countries will forever form an alliance and advance and retreat together. It will be a beautiful story that will be passed down for generations to come. TSK, that was a good plan. Enchui was also very confident in himself. He wanted to set up Nansheng? Sorry, this farm was hers, including Nansheng. Jiang Pingji changed her mind. On the surface, she dealt with Hua Yuan, letting him see the hope of forming an alliance. But she did not give him a specific answer. After all, this matter still needed to be discussed with the group of princesses. Enchui suddenly proposed to form an alliance with her. She had a feeling that there was going to be a huge change in the power of Nansheng. If there was a huge change in Nansheng, it would be a good opportunity for her to take advantage of it. The mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. She would be the last person to use a slingshot to catch the oriole. However, before coveting Nansheng's land, she had to first defeat Huang Song and become the only feudal lord in Dongqing. At the same time, Huang Song sneezed out of the blue. Cheng Jing said with concern, The weather has changed a lot recently. My lord, you must pay more attention. Chapter 13:12. Hua Yuan's sudden visit made everyone wary. Han Yu, Yang Si, and the rest had similar thoughts as Jiang Pingji. Enchui suggested an alliance at this time, most likely because there was a major change in Nansheng. They could form an alliance, but they had to figure out the whole story. They didn't want to be betrayed by their ally without knowing it. Thinking of this, they couldn't help but turn their attention to Wei Si. Wei Si was nicknamed Know-It-All, and was well informed. They didn't know that the Nansheng that Wei Si was familiar with was the Nansheng of his previous life. He had only been to Nansheng once in this life, and that was when he had the mission of forming an alliance with Yang Tao. How could he have had the time to understand anything else? To Wei Si, the current Nansheng was an unfamiliar existence. However, a big shot was a big shot. Even without the advantage of being a prophet, Wei Si could still analyze from other aspects without affecting his pretentiousness. With the experience from his previous life, and the information from this life, his understanding of Nansheng was incomparable to that of others. Wei Si said, I heard that the forces in Nansheng met, and prepared to form an alliance to attack Nanman. Hanyu nodded. I've heard of it. Everyone had heard of the news, but they didn't pay much attention to it. Nanxing was another country. They had to take care of their own territory first. Therefore, no one knew the outcome of the Nanxing meeting. Although the 4 factions of Nanman are cruel, they have a fatal weakness. They don't have many people. Their people live in barren and dangerous lands full of miasma. It's difficult for them to produce crops, Wei Xi said with certainty. In the early years, they conquered Nanxing and reaped great wealth, but they lost too many people. According to what I know, the 4 factions of Nanman had at most 1.7 million people before they attacked Nanxing, including those who died in the war, I'm afraid. Without waiting for him to finish, Jiang Pingji asked a question she was curious about. The population of the 4 factions of Nanman is only 1.7 million. Jiang Pingji's expression was a little stiff. How weak was Nanxing? It was actually defeated by the 4 factions of Nanman, which had such a small population. Deducting the children under the age of 10, who can't participate in the war, the elderly, women and children, it would be difficult for the 4 factions of Nanman to gather 300,000 strong young men. Why was Nanxing destroyed? Although the total population of the 5 countries was only 60 million, it was not difficult for Nanxing to gather a population of 10 million. A country of 10 million people was destroyed by a small tribe of 1.7 million people. Nanxing was really a noob. Wei Xi shook his head. My lord doesn't know about this. The situation of the 4 factions of Nanman is unique and cannot be measured and calculated with common sense. Jiang Pingji was surprised and asked, what's so special about it? Hanyu was well-read and knew a lot of information. He immediately understood what Wei Xi meant. I heard that the 4 factions of Nanman have some strange customs. Under Wei Xi's gaze, he opened his mouth to explain. One of the customs is to abandon the old customs. The land of the southern barbarians is not easy to cultivate, and there is a shortage of food, regardless of men or women. As long as they are over 45 years old and are unable to carry a load of 2 stone, they will move to the mountains and wait for death in a cave of death, just to save food for the young and strong. Another custom was that everyone was a soldier, regardless of gender. The people of the southern barbarian tribe could go to the battlefield at the age of 10. Their bravery and ferocity were not inferior to ordinary adults. The destruction of Nanxing is expected. Therefore, don't be fooled by the fact that the southern barbarians only had 1.7 million soldiers. The number of soldiers that could actually go to the battlefield was definitely more than 1 million. The destruction of Nanxing was not only due to the lack of combat power, but also the internal aristocratic forces that were holding each other back. Naturally, the 4 factions of Nanman became more and more courageous as they fought. They also knew that they were weak, so the tribal chief never restricted the warriors in the tribe from sowing seeds outside. Instead, he encouraged this behavior. Every time they conquered a city, they would gather the captured women together and hold a celebration party so that the warriors could thoroughly enjoy their spoils of war. For the southern barbarians, the captured women were their livestock. They provided the palace with a moving machine to give birth to their people. However, how could their sowing catch up with the speed of population depletion during the war? It would take at least 11 years for a woman to give birth to a baby that could grow to the extent of being able to go to the battlefield. The feudal vassal forces within the territory of Nanxing kept contending with the 4 factions of Nanman. Over the past few years, the war had been incessant. The population continued to plummet and fell below the 1 million mark. The current population of 1 million, including the newborns that had been born during the years of sowing seeds, their real combat power was less than half of their peak. As the saying goes, strike while they are weak. If they did not counterattack now, would the new generation of children of the 4 factions of Nanman grow up? The 4 factions of Nanman could not withstand such losses, and the power of Nanxing gradually turned the tables. Wei Xi continued. In order to not give the southern barbarians a chance to rise from the ashes, they gathered all the feudal vassal forces to work together and destroy the southern barbarians in one fell swoop. This was expected. In his previous life, Nanxing was even worse. Nanxing was ravaged by the four factions of Nanman in various ways. There were almost no decent feudal vassal forces. It was different in this life. First, Chui joined the war earlier. He had Lu Zheng and Hua Yuan by his side to assist him. Yang Tao, who should have been operating in Dongqing, went to Nanxing. This caused the battle line of Nanxing against the southern barbarians to be more stable. The situation of the war was naturally more optimistic than in his previous life. Wei Xi collected these thoughts and continued. Previously, Hua Yuan proposed an alliance. He said, if the two families form an alliance and help each other, when Chui drives out the southern barbarians, the Lord will live in Dongqing, and Chui will live in Nanxing. This shows that the situation of the alliance is very clear. Hua Yuan also helped Chui obtain 1,000,000 don of rations. Compared to the other feudal vassals, Chui naturally has a greater advantage. Even if the forces of the alliance were very united, there was a prerequisite for unity. The four factions of Nanman were their common enemy. Once the four factions of Nanman were destroyed, the external reason for the various forces to unite would be gone. The alliance would only exist in name, and it would be the turn of internal strife. If Chui could obtain the support of Dongqing's winner, Jiangpingji, during the internal strife, the chances of sweeping away the other feudal vassal forces would be higher. Wei Xi said, Hua Yuan's alliance is real, but it's hard to say if he will turn against us after the alliance benefits. Jiangpingji sneered. What's the point of turning against us after the alliance? Wei Xi was speechless. That's true. My lord loves to turn against us during the alliance period. She's very good at killing people she's familiar with. The salted fish in the live stream became more and more confused as he listened. Luoyu treading on flowers. Streamer, have you decided to form an alliance with Chui? What about the little cutie Yang Tao? Wasn't Yang Tao Jiangpingji's previous ally? In any case, he brought troops from Nanxing all the way to Dongqing to help her restrain Huang Song and Su Bei. Even though Yang Tao's motive for doing this was to avenge his father, even if there was no hard work, there was still hard work. She also benefited from it. Tutor Feiqiu, don't you know that Yang Tao is still occupying Zhangzhou and Dongqing? Making friends from afar and attacking from close quarters. Serves Yang Tao right for being closer to the streamer than Chui. Free Lemon, you only know now that she's a heartless woman. Chapter 13:13. Jiangpingji ignored Salted Fish's attack on her. She said, Chui is quite confident. The combat power of the four factions of Nanman has been greatly reduced, but he is still a ruthless character. Can a few forces win by forming an alliance? Wei Xi knew why she said that. The alliance meeting at Huangshui was an example. A group of people who participated in the alliance never put in the effort. He said, the possibility of winning is far greater than the possibility of losing. The alliance meeting at Nanshui was different from the alliance meeting at Huangshui and Dongqing. The alliance meeting at Huangshui was to protect the emperor. The enemy was the fake emperor Prince Changshu, who was trying to become emperor. To put it bluntly, it was an internal battle within the royal family. The feudal lords at the alliance meeting were idle fish watching the fun. For these feudal lords who had grown up, it was the same no matter who became the emperor of Dongqing. Therefore, most of them were just bystanders. The ones who rushed to the front were the spendthrift. They would definitely suffer the greatest losses. The feudal lords each had their own ideas. Everyone wanted to preserve their strength, so that their wings would grow stronger, and they would not listen to the imperial edict. Nanxing was different. The enemies of their alliance meeting were not their own people, but the four factions of Nanman. They were the barbarians of Nanman, who were not of the same race, and had different intentions. The barbarians of Nanman were a threat to the feudal lords of Nanxing. If the feudal lords did not join forces to suppress the four factions of Nanman, they might be killed by the four factions of Nanman when they were alone. For this reason they put in the effort. Their chances of winning were greatly increased. They were not fighting for righteousness. They were fighting for their own lives. Jiang Pengji rested her chin on her hand and said, in that case, it would be better if I agreed to the alliance? Everyone's opinion was to agree to the alliance. They might as well form an alliance. Regardless of whether they were allies or enemies, they would be crushed by her in the end. And Shui knew that she was familiar with them, but he still came forward. He could not blame her. How could Hua Yuan not know what Jiang Pingji was thinking? Just from the words she said in front of him. I once formed an alliance with Xan Zhao, Bogeo, Zheng Zhe, and Duo she also wants to form an alliance with me. Hua Yuan knew that this woman was extremely aggressive, and the danger she gave him was no less than that of the southern man. Hua Yuan did not stay for long. When he received Jiang Pingji's reply, he left with the diplomatic group. Before he left, Hua Yuan's second personality maintained a stiff smile and said to her, "It's a pity that Nanxing has many things to attend to. It's a pity that I can't see the Duke of Lanting unify Dongqing with my own eyes. Here, on behalf of my master, I wish you good luck in martial arts." Jiang Pingji said, "Thank you for your auspicious words." Hua Yuan boarded the carriage and left under the escort of his guards. Other than him, and Chui's heir, the current young master of the Yin family, was also in the carriage. This 11 or 12-year-old boy was still wearing ordinary clothes, and he even smeared some dirt on his face to hide his natural good looks. His status in the diplomatic mission wasn't that of a young master, but rather that of an inconspicuous errand boy. After the wheels of the cart rolled forward for a quarter of an hour, they were already very far away from Jiang Pingji's campsite. Only then did the youth open his mouth to ask the question. "Sir, why are you and Mr. Lu so sure that Lu Shi will win? The situation changes rapidly. Huang Song might be able to make a comeback." Far away from the campsite, Hua Yuan's second persona's brows slowly relaxed. Staying in Jiang Pingji's camp, he was constantly on edge and couldn't sleep the whole night. He kept feeling that he was in a dangerous situation and could lose his life at any time. Now that he had escaped with his life, he relaxed. "What did you see at Lu Shi's campsite in the past 2 days?" Hua Yuan treated the youth as a student and a son, and he was very attentive in giving him pointers. The youth told him the truth. He was an errand boy, and he could occasionally interact with the military camp's logistics department. Their high quality and discipline left a deep impression on him. Hua Yuan listened carefully and said, "What you saw was the key to Lu Shi's victory." The youth was stunned. Hua Yuan said, "Since ancient times, history books only record the wise men and brave generals who have the ability to determine victory from 1,000 miles away. When have they ever recorded the ordinary soldiers? No matter how smart a wise man is, his plans are still empty words if they don't come to fruition. If a general doesn't have soldiers to fight for him, he's just a boorish man. What decides the outcome of a war is often not the most intelligent people or the most valiant generals, but rather the soldiers. People exaggerate the role of strategists and generals in a war, but they ignore the soldiers. They are the key to victory. Whether it's the strategist's strategies or the general's commands and dispatches, they are essentially auxiliary. It's laughable that people are so ignorant that they often put the cart before the horse." The youth carefully pondered Hua Yuan's words, and the confusion in his eyes gradually disappeared. Seeing this, Hua Yuan smiled lightly with relief. Before he could speak, he felt a sudden pain in his head. He couldn't help but raise his hand to press on his throbbing head. The youth looked at him and knew that his teacher had lost his mind again. He didn't dare to move and looked nervously at Hua Yuan. Hua Yuan rubbed his forehead with one hand and grabbed the clothes on his knees with the other. It took him a long time to recover. The youth carefully called out, "Teacher?" When his teacher lost his mind, he often didn't recognize him. He had to confirm if the Hua Yuan in front of him was his teacher. Hua Yuan looked at the youth with a strange expression. What's wrong? Where is this place?" The youth said awkwardly, "We're on our way back." "Teacher, do you still remember me?" Hua Yuan frowned. He changed his upright sitting posture to a very casual one, and a terrifying look appeared in his eyes. "What teacher?" Hua Yuan looked around and confirmed that he was in the carriage. His expression changed instantly. "You kidnapped me?" The youth was startled by the look in his eyes and asked, "Who are you?" And Duoshi has grown bolder, hasn't he?" Hua Yuan said, "I'm Lu Shi. Stop the carriage and send me back immediately." The youth was speechless. "Oh my, No one expected Hua Yuan to split into another personality that called itself Lu Shi, the Duke of Lanting. Wei Si didn't even dare to think about such a terrifying plot. Even though Hua Yuan's personality called itself Lu Shi, the Duke of Lanting, and was stronger than an ordinary person, Hua Yuan's body was too weak. The newly born personality was still suppressed by everyone and tied up firmly. Hua Yuan messed around for the entire afternoon. The new personality finally fell into a deep sleep out of exhaustion, and the original Hua Yuan climbed back online with difficulty. The youth's eyes were filled with tears. The teacher called himself Lu Shi, the Duke of Lanting. It was too terrifying. Jiang Pingji didn't know about Hua Yuan's magical operation. She was busy training her troops and preparing to kill Huang Song. Time flew by. In the blink of an eye, the wheat fields were no longer green, and the heavy ears of wheat were dyed gold. Usually, at this time, the fields were full of people who were busy harvesting grain. The air was filled with a joyful atmosphere. But this year was different. There were no songs and laughter in the air. There was only a somber atmosphere. Huang Song sent his troops to harvest the autumn grain. He worked overtime day and night, and at the same time, he tensed up and guarded against the enemy's sneak attack. Jiang Pingji cracked her fingers, which made a crisp cracking sound. Chapter 13-14. The harvest in Jianghe County alone is enough to feed a prefecture. I've only heard of the good harvest in Hu County, but I've never seen it with my own eyes. Now that I've seen it with my own eyes, I know that the rumors are true. Huang Song was busy harvesting the autumn grain. Jiang Pingji was full of malice toward him. Anyone who was not blind could see that he was well aware of it. It had been 2 days since the autumn grain was harvested. The amount of grain harvested surprised him. Hu County used to be a place that made people pale at the mere mention of it. Who knew that after Lu Shi's reorganization, it would immediately turn waste into treasure? Whether it was peace or war, grain was a currency that was harder than gold. With grain in hand, one would not panic. However, what Huang Song lacked the most was grain. Fortunately, by the time the autumn harvest arrived, Jianghe County would be able to harvest 2 to 3 million don of new rice. Because the war had started early, the people nearby had been evacuated. No one had taken care of the fields for a few months. Fortunately, Jianghe County had a good geographical location. This year, the heavens had given them face. The harvest could barely reach the average of previous years. On the first day, they had harvested 250,000 don of autumn grain. When Huang Song heard the number, he felt the beginning of the exclamation. To prevent any undue delay, Cheng Jing divided his men into 4 groups and implemented a 4-round handover method. They harvested the autumn grain day and night. They had to be anxious. According to the scouts, Jiang Pingji had frequently mobilized her troops in the past 2 days. It was as if she was sharpening her knives to kill livestock. If they did not hurry to harvest the grain now, how could they resist Jiang Pingji's crazy attacks while harvesting the grain after the war started? Cheng Jing and the others in Huang Song's tent were so busy that their feet did not stop moving. The candles in the tent were not extinguished all night. They continued to be busy when the sky brightened. Cheng Jing did not have time to fix his appearance due to his busy schedule. The green in his eyes became darker, and his eyes were bloodshot. He was working hard, but so were the others. For example, Yuan Chong, who was on guard and patrolling, was so tired that he fell asleep every day. His strong body had also become thinner. Huang Song's forces were like a huge machine that ran at high speed. Every part of it was overloaded for a long time. In the words of the audience in the streaming room, Jiang Pingji was like the sword of Damocles hanging over their heads. They had to squeeze out their potential. Cheng Jing had never felt that time passed so slowly. According to his calculations and plans, the autumn harvest would end in half a month. But today was only the 2nd day. They still had to be on tenterhooks and be on edge for 13 days. He finally knew what it meant to live like a year. Just as he finished counting the next day's harvest, he heard the sound of galloping horses in the distance. The sound of the horses' hooves was hurried and nervous. Cheng Jing immediately walked out of the tent and saw the scout heading straight for the main tent, so he hurried over. The scout, who was investigating the enemy's military situation, suddenly pulled on the reins, and fell off the horse, before he could even catch his breath. His helmet was already drenched in sweat. "There's an urgent report from the front line, my lord." The soldiers guarding the main tent did not dare to be negligent, and immediately reported this to Huang Song. When Cheng Jing arrived, Huang Song was angrily throwing the bamboo slips on the ground. His eyes were wide open, and his chest was heaving violently. His footsteps paused, and he bent down to pick up the palm-sized bamboo slip. He read it at a glance. The bamboo slip was not big, but it contained a lot of information. After reading it, Cheng Jing understood why Huang Song was so angry. There were 3 pieces of news written on the bamboo slip. Each one was terrible and extremely unfavorable to Huang Song. First, there was a change in the battle line in Wanzhou, which had been in a stalemate for several months. Qi Guanrang switched from defense to offense. He pretended to fall for Feng Zhu's trap. He pretended to build a plank road on the surface, but secretly attacked Chen Song, turning Feng Zhu's army around. The army under Feng Zhu's command was defeated. They had no choice but to retreat 20 miles. Their morale was low. Second, Feng Jin was firmly guarding Song and Qin prefectures. He had gathered 100,000 troops and pointed their swords at Haozhou. The general guarding Haozhou had suffered many losses and was in a state of emergency. Third, Jiang Pingji had trained her troops and deployed them several times. She had consolidated 120,000 troops to guard Hu County. They could attack Jianghe County at any time. When Cheng Jing read this, he secretly added another piece of bad news to his mind. Fourth, Meng Hung and the others had been stationed at the Sanshan Valley and had not retreated. Once Jiang Pingji attacked, they would take advantage of the situation and attack from both sides. Each piece of news could bring great psychological pressure to a person, not to mention that they were all handed to Huang Song at the same time. Huang Song only angrily threw the bamboo slips on the ground. This was already considered self-restraint. Cheng Jing took a few careful glances and keenly noticed that something was not quite right. For example, the second piece of news. Feng Jin only had 30,000 to 40,000 troops. How could there be 100,000? In reality, Feng Jin did not have many troops, but he included the remnants of Huang Song's troops that he had captured. Feng Jin used 1 or 2 months to properly train these captured and deserted troops. When they attacked Haozhou, they would be pushed to the front line as cannon fodder. In troubled times, human life was the most valuable. Using cannon fodder to grind the enemy's head and fight for space for the elites was a very normal operation. 70 to 80% of Feng Jin's 100,000 troops were fake, but the 120,000 elites that Jiang Pingji had brought over were different. They were real elites. A total of 120,000 elites stared at Huang Song. Huang Song suddenly had the illusion that the outcome was already decided. Perhaps it was not an illusion. Huang Song fiercely suppressed the thoughts in his heart. Before the outcome was truly known, he could not admit defeat. Moreover, he could not show weakness in front of his own people. "My lord," Cheng Jing's voice interrupted Huang Song's wild thoughts. Huang Song looked up at Cheng Jing and said, "Yumo, do you have any countermeasures for the current situation?" Cheng Jing said, "Wanzhou has been under attack for a long time. There's no point in continuing the stalemate. It's better to let Huaijie withdraw his troops and return to defend Haozhou." He had some understanding of Qi Guanrang. The latter had always been a patient person. It was fine if he did not make a move, but once he did, it was bound to be a fatal blow. Qi Guanrang had endured for several months. He had stubbornly defended Wanzhou and refused to go to war. One could imagine how much anger he had suppressed in his heart. Feng Zhu was the best target for him to vent his anger. Qi Guanrang had changed his strategy at this time and switched from defense to offense. It was obvious that he had grasped Huang Song's weakness, so he took the opportunity to attack. It was impossible for Feng Zhu to break through Wanzhou's defense line in a short time, but Jiang Pingji could break through Jianghe County in a short time. Qi Guanrang no longer had any worries. Naturally, he would not continue to endure and defend. He took the initiative to attack Feng Zhu. Compared to Qi Guanrang, Cheng Jing knew Feng Zhu better. Unlike Feng Jin, who was calm and thorough, Feng Zhu was still very young. It was not that he was young, but that he had a young heart. Because of his outstanding talent, Fengju learned everything quickly. He did not need to study hard to surpass countless peers of his age. Others could only look up to him. Excessive smoothness would foster an excessive temper. Therefore, Fengju could not tolerate his failure. It was even more difficult for him to accept that he would fail. Fengju and Qiguan Rang were in a stalemate at the front line of Wanzhou. It might be because Fengju's stubborn temper had flared up. If he were to give up at this time, and choose to return to Hejian County dejectedly to defend Haozhou, Fengju would explode in anger. Thinking of this, Cheng Jing felt a headache coming on. Chapter 13-15. Huang Song's expression flickered incessantly. He seemed to be struggling violently. Sending Fengju back to guard Haozhou could stabilize the situation there. But this was not what Huang Song wanted. Yumo, I know your suggestion is for stability, but this is not what I want. He rejected it in a low voice. Without waiting for Cheng Jing to speak, he continued. Lanting has many troops. I'm afraid it will be difficult to defend Jianghe district. Once we fail, we can only retreat to Hejian County, or even Haozhou. In this way, Haozhou will become an isolated island in the sea, facing a situation where we are besieged on all sides. I don't want to be a trapped beast, struggling to survive. The current situation was extremely disadvantageous to Huang Song. He was not confident that he could defeat Jiang Pingji, even though he was outnumbered. Although there were many examples in the history books of people outnumbered, the conditions for it to happen were extremely harsh. Under normal circumstances, most people would still be crushed by their opponents using numbers and strength. If Jianghe district failed, Huang Song would face the situation of defending Haozhou alone. It would truly be a battle of a trapped beast. He was not as arrogant as the sons of aristocratic families, but he had his own temper and dignity. He definitely did not want to fall into such a situation. Cheng Jing understood and asked Huang Song, My lord, you mean? Huang Song muttered to himself for a while and said solemnly, Order Huijie to bring troops here to rendezvous. If there's enough time, Jiang Pingji would make her move within these 2 days. Huang Song's news would reach Fengju. It would take at least 7 or 8 days for Fengju to bring troops over. Cheng Jing heard the dejection and despair in his words. At the same time, he was shocked by Huang Song's determination. Huang Song ordered Fengju to bring troops over to rendezvous. He was mentally prepared to determine the outcome in one battle. The two sides faced each other, blocking all paths of retreat. Either Jiang Pingji or Huang Song would die. No matter who lived or died, the end of this battle would be the end of one of them, and a new beginning for the other. Cheng Jing could not say anything against it. After thinking for a long time, he could only sigh and agree. I'll draft up the transfer order now, Huang Song said. Okay. Huang Song's wife, Qi Chaolan, was a strong-minded woman. When her husband went to the front line to fight, she had to follow him from afar with hundreds of guards. She lived nearby, to help him do what she could and share his worries. The relationship between the husband and wife improved over time. Thinking of this, Huang Song could not help but smile bitterly. In the past, she had always been worried that Madame Qi would run into danger when she came to the front line. Every time she went out to fight, she would tell her not to follow. But now, she felt that it was also good for her to follow. At least she could see her once, and she wouldn't have to die with regrets. Qi Chaolan looked at him with concern and asked, Why do you look so worried? Huang Song said, Talking about what happened outside will only make Madame worry for nothing. The two of them were not far from each other, but Huang Song had not seen her for almost half a year. He had a lot to say to her. When he wanted to open his mouth, he found it hard to say anything and didn't know what to say. Madame Qi said, Even if you don't tell me, I can guess most of it. In her eyes, Huang Song was an optimistic person. Even if he suffered a setback, he would quickly recover. He didn't like to bring his work home. Even if he had a lot of troubles outside, he would put on a nonchalant attitude in front of his wife and children when he returned home, so that his family wouldn't worry. Madame Qi knew him so well, but Huang Song looked so worried this time. It was obviously not a small matter. It was very likely related to his family's life. Huang Song thought about it, then lowered his head and whispered, If I can't give you the highest glory, will you be sad? When he was young, he had suffered enough because of his birth. He had been despised and unfairly because of his birth. He knew what it was like, so he naturally didn't want his children to repeat his life. After getting married and starting a career, Huang Song paid more attention to this point. He didn't want his children to suffer. If it weren't for his good luck and his father-in-law's favor, Huang Song wouldn't have been able to marry Qi Chaolan. She had been wrong to marry him. How could Huang Song bear to let her suffer with him? In the chaos of Dongqing, his ambition grew day by day. When he dreamed at night, he also thought about that supreme position. He wanted Qi Chaolan to share it with him. Madame Qi said with a smile, "As long as Lang Jun is still here, even simple tea and simple food can be delicacies. Why should I be sad?" She said it so calmly that Huang Song didn't know how to react. Madame Qi said, "No matter who wins or loses, you have to be alive. This is the most precious thing to me. No glory or status can be exchanged for it." Huang Song choked and didn't speak for a long time. Madame Qi looked at him, and her heart couldn't help but feel sour. She had accompanied Huang Song from a teenager to a young man, and he was about to enter his 40s. How she wanted to continue to walk with him and meet him until they were old. "How can I bear to see you in a difficult situation?" Madame Qi sighed. "Do whatever you want." She and Huang Song weren't a husband and wife who respected each other, so she didn't want to use herself and their children to restrict Huang Song's choices. Huang Song's throat choked, and he didn't know what to do. His outstretched hands stopped in midair, and after a long while, he wiped away the ice or tears with his fingertips. He said in a low voice, "Don't cry. These tears aren't hanging on your face. They're clearly dripping into your husband's heart." Huang Song and his wife had been married for many years, but he had only seen her eyes turn red once. That was when Meng Zhan proposed to promise a woman from the clan to him, as a concubine to win him over. But now he had made her cry. Huang Song's heart ached so much that he couldn't help but blurt out all kinds of sweet nothings. Not only did Madame Qi not stop, but she cried even harder. She rarely cried, but once she did, her tears would burst like a dam that couldn't be stopped no matter what. Huang Song was quite frightened. Huang Song could only pick her up and coax her as if she were a child, saying a lot of nice things. "Your husband isn't a stubborn man. A real man knows when to yield and when to stand tall. I will never commit suicide just because I am defeated. You are still so young, and the child is still so young. Without your husband's protection, I will crawl back even if I go to hell." Of course, Huang Song knew that if he was defeated, committing suicide with his sword was the best way to protect his family. But when Qi Chaolan cried so sadly, his rationality collapsed. "Besides, your husband may not lose. What if I win? Wouldn't that be a happy ending?" Even salted fish had dreams, let alone people. Qi Chaolan's tears had washed away all his despair and decadence, and Huang Song's fighting spirit was high again. He had to pull himself together. The situation wasn't irreparably bad. Huang Song tried his best to coax her for a long time before she stopped crying. That day, the husband and wife spent a long time together. Huang Song woke up before dawn the next day. He thought that he had gotten up very early, but he didn't expect Madame Qi to get up even earlier. Or rather, she hadn't slept at all that night. "Madam, take them back to Haozhou and wait for me to go back." She got up and helped Huang Song get dressed. She lowered her head and said, "Okay." Watching Huang Song leave with his people, his figure gradually becoming a small black dot, her shaky emotions collapsed again. Chapter 13-16. Reporting. The sound of hurried footsteps and a loud report came from outside the tent. Qiguan Rang reacted a beat slower and asked in a low voice, "What's the matter?" Taking advantage of the fact that he had planned this for a long time, Qiguan Rang suddenly suppressed Feng Ju and caught him off guard. Then he played along and deceived a wave of enemy troops, forcing Feng Ju to retreat 20 miles. It seemed like a simple and easy victory, but in fact, he had taken a great risk. Qiguan Rang had been thinking about how to maximize the results of the battle for the past 2 days. So much so that he was overworked. His voice was much hoarser than usual. The messenger rushed all the way. His bronze cheeks were dyed red, and there were large beads of sweat on his forehead. He calmed himself down and couldn't help but say happily, "Military counselor, rejoice. The enemy has pulled out their camp and retreated." Pulled out their camp and retreated? Chiguan Rang was stunned for a moment. He suddenly stood up from his seat, and the cloak that was draped over his shoulders slipped off his shoulders and piled up at his feet. He wasn't as happy as the messenger. Instead, his expression was solemn, and his eyes were frighteningly gloomy. The enemy has retreated? When did this happen? Could it be another crafty plot, a trick to deceive the soldiers? Chiguan Rang felt that the few months of fighting with Feng Ju had exhausted a few years of his lifespan. All kinds of schemes had been continuously planned. If it wasn't him, but someone with a more impetuous temperament, they would have been cheated by Feng Ju and still counted the money for him. At this moment, Chiguan Rang was most afraid of hearing that Feng Ju had come to stir up trouble again. It was simply too annoying and impossible to guard against. The messenger said, "Last night at the 4th hour, the lights in the enemy's tent were still burning. This morning, there was no sign of smoke or fire. We were suspicious and sent people to investigate, only to find that the enemy's tent was completely empty. Looking at the time, they should have retreated last night." Chiguan Rang couldn't react for a moment. He wasn't sure if Feng Ju was really retreating, or pretending to retreat to deceive him into sending troops. He couldn't be blamed for overthinking. It was because Feng Ju had too many past records. Chiguan Rang had no choice but to be cautious. He said, "Send someone to investigate again." Not long after the messenger left, Fu Wang walked in with a displeased expression. He was still wearing the heavy and mighty armor, which made his already tall and burly body look even more sturdy. Coupled with his own imposing manner, he gave off the illusion of being cramped and oppressive just by standing there. "Military advisor, I heard that the enemy has retreated." Fu Wang was a cub raised by a wolf. He had a strong sense of aggression in his bones. The pressure on Jiang Pingji's side would also be reduced. Chiguan Rang said, "If we lead troops to intercept them, what will happen to Wanzhou? Our duty is to ensure that Wanzhou is safe. We can't take any risks." Fu Wang said again, "But our lord." Chiguan Rang looked as if he could see through Fu Wang's expression. He carefully analyzed the situation for him. If Huang Song's two armies successfully join forces, they will have a total of 160,000 to 180,000 troops. This is an exaggerated figure. Our lord has about 120,000 troops under her command. If we include General Luiyue's troops, their military strength will be equal to Huang Song's. Our lord has spent a lot of effort and a lot of money to build these troops. Huang Song's chances of winning are only 30% at most. The more Fu Wang listened, the darker his eyes became. He was like a salted fish that had lost its dreams, a small fish stranded on the beach. Chiguan Rang continued. In terms of momentum, Huang Song has suffered repeated blows and is in low spirits. He is far inferior to our lord. His chances of winning are even lower. As long as our lord doesn't make any mistakes and doesn't make any irreparable mistakes, victory is in our hands. He was very reassured about his lord's situation. So Fu Wang should give up on the idea of leading troops to pursue and attack. Fu Wang was speechless. Jiang Pingji did have an advantage over Huang Song, but this advantage could not guarantee victory. Out of respect for Huang Song, she did not do it half-heartedly. As early as when Feng Ju received the secret letter and led his troops to evacuate Wanzhou, Jiang Pingji had already begun to attack Huang Song. Huang Song could only hastily fight while harvesting the autumn rations. Luoyue was unwilling to be left alone in the Sanshan Valley. He responded to his lord's orders and cooperated with her to attack Huang Song. Huang Song could only divide his troops into several waves. Fortunately, the Sanshan Valley was easy to attack and difficult to defend. There was still a natural terrain at the border of Hu County that they could rely on. Although they were somewhat distressed, the situation was still stable, and they did not collapse. This was not good news, but it was not bad news either. Huang Song abandoned all distracting thoughts and focused on the war. "Yumo, how is the autumn rations harvest going?" Cheng Jing said, "We've collected 50%. According to the original progress, it was at most 30%, but Cheng Jing had arranged for the soldiers to rush day and night, and repeatedly compress time, to barely achieve this efficiency. Huang Song silently calculated in his heart. 50% of the autumn rations would be more than 1.2 million don, enough for the army to eat. Huang Song said, Zhanghe County is not a long-term place. The longer we delay, the more disadvantageous it will be for us. Zhanghe County itself was not an easy place to defend, not to mention that the enemy was attacking from two sides at the same time. Chapter 13:17. I have the same idea. Cheng Jing said. My lord, please look here. Cheng Jing understood Huang Song's plan. Defending Zhanghe district was not a good idea. The greatest value of this place was in the grain. Now that they had harvested 50% of the grain, it was enough for the army to eat for the next few months. This battle would not last long, so it was meaningless to continue harvesting the remaining autumn grain. Huang Song planned to withdraw his troops and leave Zhanghe district. Coincidentally, Cheng Jing had a good place to go. Where? Huang Song looked in the direction Cheng Jing was pointing. What is this place? Cheng Jing said. This place is called Changya. Changya? Huang Song was surprised. It sounds familiar, but I can't remember where I've seen it before. Cheng Jing said. Changya used to be under the jurisdiction of Hu County during the Xia dynasty. Later on, strange phenomena occurred, causing the people here to migrate. As time went by, there was no one here. When Dongqing was founded, it was separated from Hu County when the prefectures and counties were redivided. According to Cheng Jing, this place was a secluded place that everyone avoided. Huang Song thought for a long time, but could not remember where he had heard of this place. Cheng Jing continued, My lord, you must have forgotten that Changya was once the burial place of someone. His reminder immediately reminded Huang Song of something written in a random collection. The first prime minister of the Xia dynasty was buried here. What strange phenomena happened in Changya? Huang Song asked. Cheng Jing said. In the last years of the Xia dynasty, there was an extremely serious flood in Changya. The rain poured for a whole month, and the sky was filled with thunder and lightning. When the flood subsided, the people discovered that the tombs near Changya had been dug up. After some investigation, they found out that it was foreign thieves. They heard that a prime minister was resting here. The thieves suspected that there was something valuable buried in the tomb, so they took advantage of the flood to dig up the tomb. Huang Song naturally knew who the prime minister was. It was the controversial prime minister Huangfu. Cheng Jing continued. The thieves searched the prime minister's tomb, but did not find anything valuable buried with him. The coffin in the center of the tomb was washed out by the rain. After the thieves left, the coffin was discovered by a woodcutter. The woodcutter used a hatchet to chop the coffin into firewood and carried it home. The headless corpse was exposed in the wilderness. From then on, thunderstorms frequently occurred in Changya, and the people did not dare to go out at night. More than one commoner said that when they went out during a thunderstorm, they would always see an army camp with 1 million soldiers outside the town. Not only were there ghost soldiers and ghost generals, but the tents were also lit with ghost fire. The common people were afraid that the ghost soldiers would harm them, so they moved away from Changya one after another. Over time, Changya became an uninhabited ghost land. Huang Song said awkwardly, Isn't this a ghost story? He was a little scared of ghosts, Cheng Jing said. It is indeed a story. After all, Huang Song had asked him what kind of place Changya was, and Cheng Jing had brought out the story. Huang Song. Scaring people in broad daylight. Huang Song carefully examined the terrain of Changya, and had to admit that Cheng Jing's choice was correct. However, Huang Song teased, What if the ghost soldiers jump out and interfere when I'm fighting against Lanting? Cheng Jing glanced at his lord, as if he was looking at an idiot. Was this something he should be concerned about now? Reality proved that a ghost story was ultimately just a story. Changya would become uninhabited because there had been an outbreak of a plague. The source of the plague was a flood that washed a large number of floating corpses into Changya. The corpses polluted the water and caused the common people to fall ill. More than half of the common people died, and the remaining half moved away. Huang Song and Cheng Jing reached a consensus, but they were strongly opposed by the others in the tent. Yuan Xian's eldest son, Yuan Kuang, was one of the most vehement opponents. "My lord, why do we have to retreat? What Changya? That place is too open, and it's not conducive for our army to fight." Yuan Kuang really did not understand. What was so bad about staying in Jianghe County? At least there was enough food. What was the point of going to Changya? Without the terrain to rely on, how could they fight a war? Because Huang Song had punished Yuan Kuang's status was not as good as before. He was not a meticulous person, so he was only pushed out by others to stand out. His purpose was to bear Huang Song's anger, and at the same time, to sound out Huang Song's intentions. Huang Song glanced at Yuan Kuang and did not speak. Instead, it was Cheng Jing who explained patiently, but it was unknown whether he was telling Yuan Kuang or the others. Cheng Jing said, "Jianghe County is not a place that is easy to defend and difficult to attack. Lu Shi has sufficient troops. If he uses the strategy of besieging us and cutting off our food and water, how will we respond? This is the first reason. The second reason is that Lu Shi's troops will be split into two. They will attack from both sides and deal with them at the same time. As time goes on, we will still be at a disadvantage. Rather than sinking deeper into this predicament, it's better to break free as soon as possible and fight to the death." If Huang Song wanted to stay in Jianghe County, it would be more convenient for him to return to Haozhou. Huang Song's goal was for the two armies to confront each other and decide the winner in one go. Changya was a good place for a decisive battle. They did not have many advantages that they could use, and neither did the enemy. If they were to compare, Jiangpingji would be at a greater disadvantage in the Battle of Changya. Huang Song had taken over the autumn grain in Jianghe County, so he did not have the burden of the grain line. Jiangpingji had to spare extra effort to protect the grain line. Yuan Kuang's personality was like that of his late father, Yuan Xian, but he was not as experienced as Yuan Xian, and did not have the right to take advantage of his seniority. Huang Song would not change his mind because of the opposition of others, as long as there were no problems with his principles. Yuan Kuang was dissatisfied, but he was no match for Jiangpingji. He could only suppress his anger. Everyone saw Huang Song's determination, and had no choice but to agree. At that moment someone asked, "The autumn harvest is not over yet. What should we do with the grain in the fields?" "Leave it for the enemy to collect," Huang Song said indifferently. "Set it on fire and burn it." If he did not have it, others could not have it either. That night, a huge fire broke out in Jianghe County. The intensity of the fire was frightening. Jiangpingji was woken up by someone. She was wearing pajamas and a large cloak. "Is Jianghe County on fire? What happened?" She looked in the direction of Jianghe County. Flames filled the sky and dyed the dark sky red. The color was between red and orange. No one was sure. Jiangpingji smiled and said, "Could it be that Luoyue and the rest finally found an opportunity to burn Bogeo's precious autumn grain?" Luoyue was also dumbfounded. This fire was very similar to the one at Sanshan Valley. The tongue of fire seemed to want to burn everything. Who set this fire? Luoyue indicated that it was not him. Huang Song's army took advantage of the opportunity when the fire attracted the enemy's attention and retreated safely. However, they did not rest easy for long. Jiangpingji reacted after half a day. Jiangpingji said in surprise, "Bogeo retreated? But this direction doesn't seem to be retreating to Haozhou or Hejian County." Wei Xi said, "This direction is Changya." Jiangpingji looked in the direction that he was pointing. The sand table was clear at a glance. She instantly understood Huang Song's intentions. Chapter 13:18. A commander of the Federal Army, who did not stream diligently, was not a good ruler. There were too few forms of entertainment in ancient times. Without the salted fish who talked nonsense in the streaming room, what fun would there be in life? Jiangpingji had just started the streaming room when 850,000 salted fish flooded in. Her nose seemed to smell the salty smell of the sea. Of course, the screen full of greetings of good morning warmed her heart. Lemon slice soaking water. Good morning, streamer. Why do I feel that the surroundings are strange? Kneel for the emperor. It's indeed strange. Is it because of the air? The audience muttered in their hearts. Jiang Pengji did not answer. She finished the rough pancakes in her hand and drank a bowl of thick porridge with meat broth. Seeing her stretch out her tongue to lick the porridge off the corner of her mouth, one of the audience lamented. Lemon honey tea. Streamer, you're the first Duke of Dongqing. If you round it up, you're the leader of the country. Your food should be more exquisite. Didn't the ancients say that one could never get tired of eating delicacies? Seeing you in such a pitiful state every day, I'm embarrassed to eat a sumptuous meal. Although it sounded like he was showing off, he was right. Jiang Pengji really did not care about him. She did not answer. Instead, she walked out of the military tent and gestured for the audience to look in a certain direction. Huang Bogeo was really generous last night. He burned half of the autumn grain in Jianghe district. That's more than 1 million don of grain. Jiang Pengji sighed. She knew what Huang Song meant. He burned the autumn grain that could not be harvested in time, and did not leave a single grain for her. She did not lack grain, but she was not rich either. It was better to live a simple life. It would prevent her from going from extravagance to frugality. There were people who specially baked rough pancakes and cooked thick porridge for her breakfast. It was a good treatment. The audience did not understand Jiang Pengji's sentiments. Instead, they stared at the thick gray smoke on the screen dumbfounded. Setting a mountain on fire and spending the rest of his life in prison. In her era, Huang Song's actions would not be as simple as going to prison. He would even have to pay with his life. The fire was not small. It spread throughout the fertile fields in Jianghe district. The fire had been burning since last night. It was estimated that it would burn for another day. Feng Ziyi. The people of Hu County are too pitiful. The grain that they painstakingly planted for a year has been destroyed by 2 wastrels. Luoyue burned hundreds of miles of fertile fields in the Sanshan Valley, while Huang Song burned the ripe crops in Jianghe district. According to the price of goods in ancient times, these 2 fellows would definitely be in the top 3 of the list of prodigals. Jiang Pengji said, "Fighting a war is a money-burning activity." The audience in the streaming room thought about Jiang Pengji's breakfast and the food that was destroyed by the 2 fires. Even they could not help but feel sorry for her. Tudafechio. That's not right. Huang Song's troops are in Jianghe County. Why would he burn this place down? It didn't make sense. The audience's attention was focused on Huang Song as a prodigal and neglected other areas. Lingjun Sun Wenrua. They must have retreated when the fire attracted the attention of the host army. The audience chimed in one after another, and they managed to piece together the truth. Jiang Pengji didn't lead the troops to chase after Huang Song last night. Instead, she gave the troops a night to adjust their state of mind. Only on the second day did they break camp and march. However, she did not immediately head to Changye to fight with Huang Song, because Huang Song had adopted a stance of fighting to the death. Jiang Pengji could not afford to be complacent. She said to the people beside her, "Let's meet up with Luoyue and the others first. I've thought about some things for a long time. I can't let others take advantage of me." "What is it?" Naturally, it was to punish the traitor who had betrayed her. Han Yu said, "Why don't we keep these people and deal with them later?" Of course, he hated traitors, but wouldn't it be a bad time to deal with them? They should focus on the battle with Huang Song. Those traitors were not worthy of the Lord's time and effort to deal with them. Jiang Pengji smiled. "Wenbin, you can't settle the score like this. When I told others that I was sick, they climbed over the wall and stabbed me in the back. I even caught them red-handed. What wouldn't they do when they knew that they were going to die? If I were to fight Bogeo and they played dirty tricks, flirted with Bogeo, and set me up, how would I settle the score? Even if Bogeo was more skilled, these people wouldn't have to die. Instead, they would become heroes who claimed credit from Bogeo. Wouldn't that be letting them off easy?" Han Yu had finally witnessed his lord's narrow-mindedness and ability to hold a grudge. He sighed. "They are just some fickle villains. There is no need for my lord to delay the battle and specially deal with them." Although that was what he said, Han Yu did not stop Jiang Pengji. It would only take 1 or 2 days, and they could afford to wait. Besides, Killing these traitors as a sacrifice could also boost the morale of the army. It was not a bad thing. There were two groups of people who had betrayed Jiang Pingji. The first group was from Jianghe County. These people not only betrayed her, but they also put their betrayal into practice. In the end, they turned to Huang Song. These people were still under Huang Song's protection. If Jiang Pingji wanted to kill them, Huang Song would have to be involved. The second group was those who flirted with Huang Song and secretly communicated with him. They had not yet climbed over to Huang Song's side. They were arrested by Luoyue and kept under strict supervision. Jiang Pingji now had to deal with these people. After spending most of the day, Jiang Pingji and Luoyue's troops successfully met up. When Luoyue saw Jiang Pingji, he immediately got off his horse and apologized. I was not strict in commanding the troops, so the villains took advantage of the loopholes and caused us to lose the battle. Please punish me, my lord. Honest Yang Jingrong. Wait, since when did the host have such a person? Most of the audience was unfamiliar with Luoyue. Many of the older audience members could not remember who he was. If it was not for Jiang Pingji's outstanding memory, she might have forgotten about Luoyue, who did not fight for anything and had no sense of presence. You can't be blamed for the incident in Hu County. Although you are responsible, you only have to bear 30% of the responsibility. As for the burning of the grain in Sanshan Valley, it was forced by the situation after all. The most important thing is to protect the troops and horses in the camp. The grain can be planted again if it's gone, but the people are gone. Jiang Pingji did not put all the blame on Luoyue, but she did not say that he was not at fault either. In the end, she heavily punished Luoyue with a few months' worth of military pay and reprimanded him verbally. What about those people? Have you seen them all? Jiang Pingji asked. Luoyue was stunned for a moment. He did not know who she was referring to. Only Meng Heng reacted. My lord wants to interrogate them now. Jiang Pingji said coldly. Kill them as a sacrifice to the flag and the souls of the heroes. If we don't interrogate them now, are we going to keep them alive for the new year? She did not make the people who betrayed her pay the price immediately. Instead, she allowed them to linger on for a few months. This was already very merciful. Meng Heng sent someone to bring in the group of masterminds. He also handed a treasured name list to Jiang Pingji. Looking at the situation, everyone was confident. The salted fish in the live stream was anxious and fearful. He had a feeling that something big was going to happen. AI de Tian Lingling. Streamer, what are you doing? Chapter 1319. Just as Jiang Pingji had said, she was there to collect a debt. Those who betrayed her and caused the soldiers under her command to die in vain were directly or indirectly related to these people. She was a magnanimous person, but she was also stingy. This debt must be paid with their heads. Meng Heng and the others did not mistreat the prisoners, but before they were captured, these prisoners had been living a life of luxury. The mouthwash they used was a precious item that ordinary people could not afford. They suddenly lost everything and were treated like ordinary soldiers. Naturally, they could not adapt. When they were brought before Jiang Pingji, their faces were yellow, oily and dark. Their clothes were wrinkled like dried vegetables. Do you know who I am? Jiang Pingji asked them with a smile. But her smile did not have much of a smile. Instead, it gave the illusion that it was bone-chilling. More than 10 people were pressed to the ground and kneeling. Their hands were tied behind their backs. If they wore prison clothes, they would really look like prisoners. One of them said, Lu Shi, why did you capture us? Aren't you afraid of being despised and cruel? Not only did I capture you, but I also wanted to kill you as a sacrifice. I can't control other people's mouths. They can say whatever they want. Can they hurt me? Whether it's your merits or demerits will be judged by future generations. You know very well what you've done, Jiang Pingji said. Let me give you a piece of advice. If you confess, you'll be lenient. If you resist, you'll be severely punished. Admit it quickly. Don't make a fuss until you lose your last shred of dignity. That won't look good. Of course there was evidence. Meng Heng had always been cautious. The evidence of these fellows colluding with Huang Song was well kept. With such evidence in hand, Jiang Pingji could not kill them. Even if she killed their clansmen, People would only applaud and praise her for doing a good job. When Jiang Pingji mentioned this, the few people who were jumping around suddenly stopped talking. They were guilty and afraid. Everyone was scared out of their wits. Instead, one of them knelt down and asked her, "Do you have the ambition to rule the world?" Jiang Pingji was not angry. Instead, she laughed and asked, "What do you think? I know that I will die, so I dare not defend myself. But if you have such ambition, do you know that the reward is equal to the merit, and the punishment is equal to the crime? The reward should be equal to the merit, and the punishment should be equal to the crime." Of course, Jiang Pingji understood what he meant. "Are you implying that I'm not giving out proper rewards and punishments?" That person shook his head. Of course, he wouldn't court death like that. This wasn't courage or backbone. This was courting death by dragging his entire family with him. "I wouldn't dare. It's just that going too far is as bad as not going far enough. Although the crime of colluding with the enemy is punishable by death, there are also different degrees of severity." The man was so scared that he almost bit his tongue. His face was flushed red, but he still forced himself to say, "When rewards are given, the soldiers will definitely fight to kill the enemy and gain merit. The punishment is appropriate for the crime. Those who commit serious crimes will plead guilty, while those who commit light crimes will learn from it. They will be grateful and won't dare to do it again. This will also deter those who have ulterior motives." If the Duke of Lanting did not distinguish between right and wrong, regardless of the severity of the crime, and executed all of them, wouldn't that be unfair? Han Yu couldn't help but look at the man after he finished talking. "What you said makes sense. The punishment for a completed crime and an attempted crime are always different." Jiang Pingji smiled and changed the topic. "But for me, colluding with the enemy is colluding with the enemy. It's a fact that you colluded with Bogeo. Your ambition is written in black and white on the letter. Is it not a betrayal just because your family didn't have time to move to Bogeo's territory?" Normally, Jiang Pingji wouldn't have bothered to explain so much. But Han Yu was there. She had to make it clear, so that she wouldn't ruin her image. The man's face turned red. He couldn't argue with Jiang Pingji. This is betrayal and colluding with the enemy. Jiang Pingji continued, "If we really want to talk about the severity of the crime, you guys are slightly less serious than the families in Jianghe County. If it was more serious, they would die. But if it was less serious, they would still die. The only difference was that the former would die more, while the latter would die less." No one dared to make a sound. The man took a deep breath and asked, "If that's the case, how does the Duke of Lanting plan to deal with us?" "Kill them." It was an expected answer. But he was more concerned about how Jiang Pingji would deal with his family. Jiang Pingji naturally didn't have that much time to deal with it. She directly handed it over to Han Yu. The lightest punishment would be the extermination of one family, while the heaviest punishment would be the execution of all three families. If Jiang Pingji was still the commander of the federal army, she certainly wouldn't do that. According to the federal law, an individual who committed treason and colluded with the enemy would only be sentenced to death. In serious cases, the family members' freedom would be restricted, and they would be put under observation for a few years, but they wouldn't lose their lives. However, this was ancient times, a place where the development of all aspects of society was extremely backward. Although the family members didn't have the intention to commit a crime, due to various considerations, they still had to be punished with capital punishment to achieve the effect of deterrence. Jiang Pingji wouldn't be too serious about this. She still had to go with the flow. Han Yu carried out his orders. The masterminds that he caught were all thrown to the flag by Jiang Pingji. The flag was sacrificed before the expedition, so as to stimulate the soldiers' fighting spirit and morale. Jiang Pingji also asked Wei Xiai to write an elegiac oration for the 6,000 soldiers who had died in vain. The effect of this move was outstanding. The soldiers were sad and angry at the same time, but at the same time, their fighting spirit was ignited. They couldn't wait to rush to Huang Song and defeat him. The disloyal people were anxious. If they wanted to betray her in the future, they would have to think twice about whether the thing on their necks was more important or taking the risk for their future. Jiang Pingji felt refreshed after collecting a debt. Next, She would go to Changye to settle things with Huang Song. All troops set off. After the army rested and reorganized, they set off again. Jiang Pingji glanced at the bullet screen out of boredom. Only then did she realize that the bullet screen was much quieter. It was really hard to adapt to a salted fish who didn't talk nonsense. The salted fish was frightened by the way she sacrificed people to the flag. He trembled in front of the screen. Jiang Pingji looked at the bullet screen for a while. Then she turned off the bullet screen and focused on marching. Wei Ci and the others were also silent. As time went by, their expressions became more and more solemn. The whole army was permeated with a solemn atmosphere. This battle was related to whether the territory of Dongqing would be completely in Jiang Pingji's pocket. Naturally, no one was in the mood to talk about other things. Jiang Pingji drew up a battle plan as they hurried on the road. She was so busy that she couldn't rest. Report: traces of the enemy's march have been found ahead. It seems that we're on the right path, Jiang Pingji said. All troops on guard. Although it was only traces of the enemy's march, there was no guarantee that the enemy would launch a sneak attack halfway. It was better to be cautious and take precautions. Because Jiang Pingji had to rendezvous with Luoyue, she wasted some time dealing with a few traitors and sacrificing them to the flag. Therefore, she was delayed for nearly 2 days. Huang Song had set off earlier than her. It was hard to guarantee that he wouldn't set up an ambush. In fact, Huang Song was even more nervous than she was. However, the scouts that were sent out could not find any traces of Jiang Pingji's army. This made him even more flustered. He was like a criminal awaiting his death sentence. In addition, Chapter 1320. The officials left the palace in 2s and 3s with the same question in their hearts. What happened to His Majesty recently? In my opinion, we should ask Zixiao about this. He must know the best. Feng Zhen's residence was close to Yang Xi's, and their temperaments were to his liking. They often went to court together. Yang Xi asked if he knew the reason why His Majesty was unhappy recently. Feng Zhen couldn't answer, so he pushed Wei Ci out. Yang Xi secretly took out some snacks from his sleeve and stuffed them into his mouth. Morning court was too early. In order not to make a fool of themselves in court, the officials often didn't dare to eat breakfast. This was such a cruel thing for a foodie. Yang Xi could only bring his own snacks to fill his stomach. Feng Zhen was also hungry. He reached into Yang Xi's sleeve and skillfully found his snacks. One couldn't help but wonder if Feng Zhen liked to hang out with Yang Xi because of their similar temperaments, or because of Yang Xi's snacks. Yang Xi said, "Of course I asked, but Zixiao doesn't know either." Sigh. His Majesty is indeed more irritable than usual these days. His superior's face was sullen all day, as if everyone owed her millions. The officials were also under a lot of pressure. Every morning when the imperial court was presented, even the group of imperial censors who loved to stir up trouble were as quiet as chickens. Feng Zhen put his hand on Yang Xi's shoulder and frowned. Even Zixiao doesn't know? It looks like the situation is quite serious. Yang Xi slapped Feng Zhen's hand away in disgust. If you don't want to be criticized by the imperial censors, you should behave yourself. Feng Zhen wore a dignified official's robe, but this prodigal always had the ability to wear formal clothes as a uniform. He was often criticized by the imperial censors. Although the position of the imperial censors wasn't high, their authority wasn't small. From admonishing the emperor to supervising the officials, there was nothing they didn't dare to criticize. From important matters of state to trivial matters like clothing and speech, they would feel uncomfortable if they didn't criticize them every day. Feng Zhen laughed. There's no need to worry when there are so many lice. Yang Xi laughed coldly. Don't you feel embarrassed when your father is criticized by your son in court? Feng Yi had also reached the age to enter officialdom, but this child didn't choose to be sent out to gain experience. Instead, he chose to become the supervising imperial censor. This child was really merciless in his actions. He would scold a group of uncles and elders without hesitation. His upright temperament was the complete opposite of his father's. Although the rank of an imperial censor was not high, not everyone could become one. The job requirements were even stricter than that of an ordinary official position. Not only did they have to forget their personal interests and country, but they also had to be upright, straightforward, and daring to speak frankly. They had to be knowledgeable, be well-versed in the government affairs of various places, and be knowledgeable in the past and present. For Feng Yi to be able to become an imperial censor at such a young age, she naturally had a solid foundation. Her only regret was that she had offended too many people. A few days ago, he even insulted his father. He didn't know if Feng Zhen had punished Feng Yi according to the family rules after she returned. Feng Zhen laughed shamelessly. It's not embarrassing. Other people don't even have the chance to be embarrassed even if they wanted to. Yang Si decisively stopped the topic of self-torture and forcefully changed the topic. Why don't we persuade Her Majesty to let the imperial physicians examine her carefully? Yang Si said. Her face is gloomy all day long, and she's so timid that she can't stand being frightened. You don't know this, but the official living next door was so scared that he had nightmares every night. Within 2 days, he claimed to be sick and stayed at home. It was all an act. Her Majesty's aura was too strong. When she was in a bad mood, the hundreds of officials going to court was as tragic as going to hell to meet their deaths. Feng Zhen replied, I wouldn't dare. If the imperial physician says that His Majesty is angry because the geraniums have gone extinct. Yang Si was shocked by Feng Zhen's guess. How old is His Majesty? How could he have gone extinct? Feng Zhen said, Isn't this just a guess? He guessed that Jiang Pengji was in a bad mood because the Tiankui was extinct. Feng Zhen wasn't the only one. However, the officials did not dare to inquire about the emperor's condition. To put it nicely, they were concerned. To put it bluntly, they were spying on the emperor's body. Fortunately, His Majesty already had Her Highness the Crown Princess. If Tian Kui died, many officials shuddered and didn't dare to continue thinking about it. It was said that once a woman's temperament went berserk, her temper would last for a year or two. How were they going to survive in the future? Jiang Pingji looked at Wei Ci with a what the F***ck expression. Is this how those fellows usually talk about me behind my back? Jiang Pingji didn't like to refer to herself as the emperor. She still used I in private, unless it was a more important occasion. Wei Ci smiled and said, His Majesty has been upset recently. The officials are naturally worried about His Majesty's body. Jiang Pingji chuckled and suddenly covered her face with her hands. Zixiao, you can leave. I want some peace and quiet. Wei Ci asked, What exactly is His Majesty upset about? Jiang Pingji was like a salted fish. What will come will come. I'm fine. I've just embarrassed myself recently. Just let me have some peace and quiet. Wei Ci didn't understand, but apart from Jiang Pingji being in a bad mood, there was nothing wrong with her. He could only leave in confusion. As soon as he left, a large string of golden bullet screens popped up in the live stream. There were only 2 types of bullet screens in Jiang Pingji's live stream room, red and blue. However, a third type popped up a while ago, golden bullet screens. She was studying what was going on with the golden bullet screens, when one of the bullet screens caught her attention. When will the commander be single? Jiang Pingji? The streamer's name is exactly the same as our commander's. When she saw the content, her heart suddenly skipped a beat. She quickly wanted to close the live stream room, but she was stunned to find that the close button could not be used. The live stream room had switched to a timer mode. I remember that the streamer is the future commander of the Federation's army, Guikai Guofengxiu, and it's the 7th Army, Cafeteria Dafinanti. Could it be an acquaintance? Such a coincidence? Jiang Pingji was speechless. Fu**K. Did this group of salted fish have any brains? They revealed her secret the moment they came. Were they that happy to watch her charaba? After a while, there were more and more golden bullet screens in the livestream room. These people did not seem to be limited by the upper limit of 850,000 viewers. It only took a moment for them to get off the horse. Even though Jiang Pingji was using Lu Shi's body, her temperament and habits were all her own. Those who were familiar with her could find something fishy. The salted fish in the live stream room were still happily revealing her secret. It wouldn't take long for Jiang Pingji's disguise to be exposed. What a heartless world. For all, The crowd did not care about her violent psychological activities. Instead, they added fuel to the fire. It was as if they had found an organization to expose Jiang Pingji's dark secrets. The salted fish from the three dimensions had a cordial meeting. Jiang Pingji felt that she had lost her face to the abyss of the sea of stars. It took more than 10 years to build a small farm? The army commander has a second spring in her life. The mature royal sister was once a handsome lowly? 10,000 credits to buy the lowly photo of the army commander at a high price. Stewed a frog for more than 10 years? The mystery of the army commander's single status was finally revealed. Transmigrated to save the loner. She gave up being the army commander and ran to be a farmer on a small farm. Was this the fall of human nature or the tragedy of society? Jiang Pingji suddenly sat up straight. She was so scared that she broke out in a cold sweat. Weici, I asked, did you have a nightmare? Jiang Pingji said, I had a super scary dream. What dream? The dark history that I tried so hard to cover up was all revealed. As a big shot. How could such an embarrassing thing happen? Chapter 13:21. Is this place Changya? It's really desolate. Jiang Pingji was worried halfway. But she didn't expect Huang Song to have no intention of ambushing them. Instead, she thought too much. Changya was a small place near Hu County. The terrain was flat and wide. Although there were mountains, the terrain was very flat. If the place was renovated, the river water would be diverted, the soil would be fertile, and it could be managed seriously for 3 to 5 years. Perhaps it would become a good grain-producing district. Along the way, Jiang Pingji found many ruins of houses. She could vaguely make out the appearance of a village or small town. Green vines and weeds crawled on the broken walls. Many snakes, insects, rats, and ants hid there. After entering Changya and marching for a few miles, she didn't see any signs of human habitation. Jiang Pingji couldn't help but complain. Choosing this place as the location for the battle, does Bogeo think that his grave is not desolate enough? Changya was even more desolate than the place where the Tsingyi army and the Red Lotus group had wreaked havoc. It was as if it had been forgotten by the whole world. There have been several outbreaks of plague here. The people who could move away have moved away. Those who couldn't move away in time, most of them died of illness. Changya was a district that produced abundant grain. Unexpectedly, the rain flowed backward and washed the floating corpses left behind from other battles. The plague ran rampant, and the small town with a population of tens of thousands died. Many years had passed since then. The people who moved away still didn't dare to step into Changya. While they were talking, a group of scouts rushed over on horseback. Report, the enemy has set up camp 15 miles away. Continue to investigate, Jiang Pingji said. Let's choose a place to set up camp. Setting up camp was a skill. Not only did they have to choose a good place, but they also had to consider the structure of the entire camp. Both aspects were satisfied. Not only could they prevent the enemy from ambushing them, but they could also take the initiative on the battlefield. However, Huang Song had arrived earlier than them. He must have thought it through and picked a good place. It would be difficult for Jiang Pingji to take advantage of him. Setting up camp was prioritized near a water source. It was convenient for the soldiers to use water daily. This was one of the most basic principles of setting up camp. Shirji, why don't you set up camp on a nearby hill? At least you can take advantage of the terrain. As for the water source, there should be spring water, right? It satisfies the needs of the terrain and water source. The streamer chose this place, which is very convenient for the enemy to attack. Qixing Fengming. Streamer, don't listen to the streamer's nonsense. Isn't it shameful of a layman to guide an expert? If the host does as you say, the host will immediately become the next Masu. It was currently autumn, and the spring was gradually drying up. Even if it was spring and summer, could the spring water on the mountain supply the hundreds of thousands of soldiers? Without a water source, Huang Song didn't have to do anything. He could just block the foot of the mountain and set fire to the host. Choosing to build a camp on flat ground was not a complete disadvantage for the streamer. After all, the cavalry under her command was not just for show. Jiang Pingji did not pay attention to the streaming room. Naturally, she did not see the bullet screen. Report: a large number of skeletons have been discovered near the barracks. Jiang Pingji raised her eyebrows and smiled at the people beside her. Did we set up camp on someone else's burial mound? This was because burial was popular in ancient times, and some places even preferred sky burial. It was very normal to randomly dig up someone's grave. Jiang Pingji had been away fighting wars for so many years, and she often encountered such awkward situations. However, she would not change the location of the camp just because it was on someone's grave. At most, she would ask the owner of the grave to move to another place. I don't think so. Changya used to be the capital of a small country during the period of the 16 kingdoms. Several wars broke out here, so it is normal to dig up a large number of skeletons. When Han Yu saw that all the skeletons were headless, he was even more convinced of his judgment. During the period of the 16 kingdoms, military merits were calculated based on the number of people killed. It was normal to cut off the heads of captives in exchange for military merits. Now it was changed. It was not convenient to carry a human head around, so the ears or noses of the enemies were usually cut off. Jiang Pingji also went to take a look. The pit was full of densely packed corpses, and they were all headless. She also found a pit full of heads nearby. Jiang Pingji sighed with emotion. It's better to burn the corpses in a war. It's also convenient. It's better than leaving the corpses in the wilderness. Han Yu secretly glanced at his lord. If they were burned, there would be no bones left. He really could not see how it was better than leaving the corpses in the wilderness. However, his lord had always liked to burn the corpses of her enemies. It had been a habit for almost 10 years, and everyone was used to it. The area of the barracks was huge. Apart from the corpses left from the ancient battlefields, the graves of ordinary people would always be accidentally burned. She found that the corpses of the people didn't have heads. Why? Did someone dig up the graves and steal the corpses, then cut off their heads to pass it off as military merits? It's possible, but there was a funeral custom in Changya where the corpses were separated from their families. Moreover, these graves look very intact and have not been touched by anyone. It should be done by the people themselves, Han Yu said slowly. My lord, you also know that Changya is the burial place of the prime minister of the previous dynasty, right? During the years when the plague broke out in Changya, the prime minister's grave was robbed, and the bandits invaded it. Many people thought that the plague was a disaster sent by the prime minister. Only by separating the corpses after death could the anger of the prime minister be appeased. That's why such a custom came into being. I don't see the logic in it. When the plague broke out, they didn't find the source of infection or control the infection channel. Instead, they sent secret letters and made up alarmist rumors. It was ridiculous. Get rid of all the corpses. Remember to stay away from the water source. Even without Jiang Pingji's special reminder, the soldiers would not make such a mistake. Jiang Pingji had high requirements for hygiene, which resulted in the soldiers under her command getting sick far less often than other feudal lords, due to acclimatization. The first night of setting up camp was also a good opportunity for the enemy to launch a sneak attack. Jiang Pingji had just arrived with her troops and was busy setting up the camp. The soldiers were exhausted, but the enemy had finished resting. The enemy could launch a sneak attack before the camp was fully formed, and the soldiers were not energetic. Jiang Pingji said with certainty, Bogeo will attack the camp tonight to test us. Tell the soldiers to patrol carefully and not to let their guard down. Han Yu and the others were only 50% sure that Huang Song would not attack the camp tonight, but Jiang Pingji knew that he would definitely come. Huang Song would not let this opportunity slip by. The situation was very unfavorable for him. He naturally had to find a chance to boost the morale. A night attack was a good choice. On the battlefield, Huang Song did not have as many troops as Jiang Pingji. Their combat power was not equal, so the chances of winning were not high. Therefore, he had to find another way. It was close to midnight. The scouts sent to keep an eye on the enemy's camp did not find any signs of the enemy moving troops. No movement. Everyone was quite surprised. Did Huang Song give up this opportunity? Jiang Pingji stayed in the main tent. From time to time, the sound of candles crackling could be heard in the air. The swaying candlelight illuminated the main tent. She did not take off her armor. Instead, she sat upright and meditated. She closed her eyes and relaxed her spirit. Her god-slaying sword was placed flat on her knees. Would Huang Song let go of this opportunity? Of course not. It's inevitable that we have an unfair advantage. Chapter 13:22. Spirit was also a form of energy. Due to the two subsystems in her mental brain domain, Jiang Pingji rarely used it on a large scale. She wanted to prevent her mental strength from being empty and giving the subsystems a chance to stir up trouble. Usually, she strictly controlled the range of her spirit and only covered 100 meters around her. If outsiders stepped into the range of her mental domain, she would be able to discover their existence. It was an excellent means of warning. In the future Federation, it was extremely difficult for outsiders to assassinate a master with a strong mental brain domain, because they could not avoid the first warning line. Of course, if the killer was also a master with a strong brain domain and extremely precise mental control, there was still a chance of success. However, Jiang Pingji had yet to encounter one. In the past, the range of Jiang Pingji's mental coverage was at least a radius of 10,000 meters. Now who could snipe her from 10,000 meters away? A radius of 100 meters was enough, and it could be used all day long. Out of caution, when she arrived with her troops, she used her spirit to check carefully. As long as the duration was short, the consumption of her spirit was not great. Soon after, she found thousands of people hiding in the deep mountains. What were these people doing? It was easy to figure it out. According to normal people's thinking, the troops attacking at night must have come from the camp. Therefore, keeping an eye on the enemy's camp could determine the timing of the enemy's attack. As soon as they moved, the scouts would sound the alarm. Who would have thought that Huang Song would send troops to hide in the mountains early in the morning? Because they knew that Jiang Pingji would not choose to camp in the mountains, the traces of this group of people would not be exposed. What time is it now? Jiang Pingji stood up and picked up the god-slaying sword on the mat. She asked the soldiers guarding outside in a clear voice. "My lord, it's 1:15 midnight." Jiang Pingji calculated the time and strode out of the main tent. "Send someone to inform them immediately that the enemy is coming. The northeast side of the main camp is on alert." Jiang Pingji did not use the camera in the streaming room. Although using the camera would not consume her own mental strength, the field of view was limited. Once there was an obstacle, there would be a blind spot in some places. In contrast, Jiang Pingji's mental strength was omnipresent. The soldier was stunned for a moment, as if he was surprised how Jiang Pingji knew this news. Yes, the guard immediately ran out. The rest of the people stood in place and guarded the main tent loyally. Jiang Pingji whistled. Little White, who was sleeping nearby, seemed to feel it. It woke up and snorted, then ran toward her. At the same time, the enemy's thousands of troops were ready for battle. In order to reduce their movements, the horses' hooves were wrapped in dried grass, and the horses' mouths were also covered. When the appointed time arrived, a black shadow ran over like a ghost. The other party lowered his voice and said, "General, everything is ready. What's the situation in the enemy's camp?" The man said, "The patrols are still tight, but the tents have not been set up yet. The northeast direction is the best place to break through." The hundreds of thousands of soldiers in the camp were connected to each other, stretching for dozens of miles. This was a huge project. Even with so many people working together, building a proper camp was not something that could be completed in a day. Jiang Pingji's camp was still half finished. The soldiers in charge of logistics were working overtime to build it. The encampment was the first line of defense. If the basic line of defense was not built, it would be easy for the enemy to launch a sneak attack. Gather the troops and set off. The night was dark, and the campfire in the distance lit up the camp like the brightest pearl in the night. In ancient times, the conditions for a night attack were harsh. Because the people were malnourished, the prevalence of night blindness was extremely high. Huang Song took great pains to select these thousands of people. The night was dark, but they could still see the road clearly. They sneaked all the way to the enemy's camp. They thought they were being careful, but they did not know that everything was under Jiang Pingji's control. The camera in the streaming room had a visual angle, but her spirit did not. She clearly saw the thousands of people split into two groups and sneaked out of the camp. The enemy was right under her nose, but Jiang Pingji still had the mood to joke. Wenbin, don't you think this is like what happened in Shanwu City? Han Yu was stunned. It took him a while to understand what Jiang Pingji was referring to. During the Battle of Shanwu City, Han Yu took advantage of the blind spot of the deserters to secretly send out the men to attack at night. If Jiang Pingji's martial arts were not so good, maybe Xieze's night attack would have been successful. Once she died, the crisis in Shanwu City would be solved. Han Yu smiled. You think it's similar, my lord? Jiang Pingji said sincerely. But Bogeo's is not as good as yours. Jiang Pingji really did not notice Han Yu's sneak attack. Her usual alert range was either 100 meters or covered the whole camp. It rarely extended beyond the camp, because the larger the alert range, the longer it lasted, the heavier the burden on her, and the easier it was for the system to play tricks. Han Yu said, "You flatter me, my lord. I don't deserve it." His lord was very stingy, but she was also very magnanimous. If an ordinary person were to talk about how they had suffered a setback, they would definitely feel uncomfortable. But Jiang Pingji was different. She not only took the initiative to mention it, but she also used it to tease others. She did not hold a grudge at all. Han Yu was not used to it. He was shocked by her at first, and thought she was going to settle scores with him. As they were talking, the enemy had already sneaked out of the northeast camp. Because the watchtower had not been built yet, the alert range of the camp was limited. However, if they were closer, they would be easily discovered. Jiang Pingji suddenly said, "They're coming." As soon as she finished speaking, the enemy's arrows flew over the crude wooden fence of the camp. The arrows rained down from the sky. For a moment, there were several screams in the camp. It was creepy, because Jiang Pingji had asked them to be alert. The soldiers nearby immediately reacted after the wave of arrows. They sounded the alarm and organized to defend against the enemy. The enemy also rushed in at this time. Hundreds of armored horses broke through the paper-made wooden fence. Without the wooden fence, the enemy followed closely behind and successfully rushed into the camp. The archers lit up the fire arrows. Kill. Enemy attack. The movement quickly spread to the whole camp. Like a pot of boiling hot water, the whole camp was alarmed. The enemy came aggressively, like a hot knife cutting through butter. They rushed in all the way, but they soon found something was wrong. The soldiers under Jiang Pingji's tent reacted too quickly. The fierce momentum seemed to have hit an iron plate, and suddenly slowed down. The enemy appeared one after another, and the soldiers from both sides were in a mess. Oh no, we've been tricked. Such a swift reaction speed was a clear indication that the enemy was well prepared. Chapter 1323. General, the enemy is already prepared. What do we do now? Seeing that the number of enemies was increasing, their charge was met with a strong obstacle, and it was difficult for them to advance. Instead, they were being suppressed by the enemy. Seeing this situation, the general in charge of the sneak attack was so angry that his eyes turned red. But the weapon in his hand never stopped, and blood dyed the ground. Fight and retreat. He was one of the few generals under Huang Song's command who did not come from the Yuanshe family. He was extremely decisive. Seeing that the enemy had already set up an ambush, he decisively chose to give up. However, he did not order his soldiers to turn and run. Instead, he ordered them to retreat in an orderly manner. As long as they could retreat before the enemy reinforcements arrived, it would not be a problem to preserve most of their forces. Although Jiang Pingji had more people on her side, she couldn't block them all at once. Of course, if the battle dragged on for too long, the soldiers under Jiang Pingji's command could exhaust them to death. Time was running out, and the enemy was closing in on them. The sneak attack soldiers couldn't help but feel despair as they faced the endless stream of enemies. Jiang Pingji was the first to notice the situation on the battlefield. She raised her eyebrows when she saw the general retreat decisively. There were many talents under Huang Song's command, but for some reason, they were not valued. As a result, many of them were not famous. Not to mention anything else, this person's ability to judge the situation was much better than Yuan Xian's. However, my place is not a hotel. How can you come and go as you please? Jiang Pingji laughed and gave Little White an order. Little White changed its meek behavior and galloped toward the northeast. The sneak attack came very suddenly. Even with Jiang Pingji's early warning, casualties were inevitable in a battle between two armies. When Jiang Pingji arrived on Little White's back, the area within 200 feet of the northeast barracks was a mess. Weapons and arrows were scattered everywhere. Corpses of both sides were lying on the ground. Fresh blood soaked the soil, and a strong smell of blood wafted in the hot and stuffy air. Jiang Pingji was cold. Without saying a word, she carried the god-slaying sword and joined the chaotic battle. The blade was like the black and white ghosts of impermanence's magic weapon that could reap souls. With one slash she killed a person. She and Little White had worked together for many years, and their teamwork was excellent. She would slash, while Little White would charge and trample. Master. Xieze was in charge of the northeast barracks. When he saw that his lord was also present, he was so scared that his heart almost went out on strike. Jiang Pingji gently swung the god-slaying saber. Fresh blood splattered on the ground, leaving a long trail. The tainted blood faded from the blade, and it became clean and shiny again. Yuan Gui, gather some soldiers and follow me. Xieze held back countless words of ridicule in his heart, but what he blurted out was, "This general obeys your order." He turned around and called for a group of soldiers and horses, gathering more than 1,000 elites at the fastest speed. Although Xieze did not have night blindness, his night vision was only at the level of an ordinary person. He wasn't blind, but he still couldn't see clearly a few feet away. He also knew how dangerous it was to fight at night. If they were not careful, they could easily be killed by the enemy. How could the Lord not understand this? Everyone keep up. My lord, you can just leave the task of chasing after the thieves to me. Why do you need to take the risk yourself? Xieze never thought that there would be a day when he would worry about his lord stealing his job. My lord is brave and good at fighting. As a general, I am deeply ashamed. They're cutting off their tail in order to survive. They're abandoning a portion of their troops to hold up the rear, while the vanguard takes the opportunity to pull away. Now that the night is dark, as long as they can open up a distance of 30 to 40 feet, it will be even harder to catch up with them, Jiang Pingji said. Keep up, don't lose them. Day was different from night. A person's field of vision was limited. The enemy only had to worry about running forward, but the pursuing troops had to consider many aspects. Jiang Pingji was very clear that even if Xieze led the troops to chase after them, he would at most bring back 100 or 200 corpses. The real big shots would be firing the cannons. Xieze said, My lord, the wilderness is dangerous and unpredictable. You'd better, Jiang Pingji said. Your eyes aren't good. If I let you chase after them, the enemy will be long gone. Xieze was speechless. Jiang Pingji's night vision was extremely strong. Even if this body was Lu Shi's, her night vision was still better than that of an ordinary person. Besides, no matter how fast the enemy ran, could they be faster than her mental strength? As long as they were within the range of her mental strength, she could find the enemy's position at any time. Soon, Xieze understood why his lord said that their eyes weren't good. The soldiers chasing after the enemy lost them, but Jiang Pingji confidently pointed out the enemy's direction. 2 points in a line, they headed straight for it. Not long after, Xieze heard the enemy's movements. Jiang Pingji took down the bow and arrows on the horse's back as she rode. She knocked an arrow, and drew the bow to a full moon in one breath. Several arrows left the bowstring and flew. The arrowheads seemed to have eyes and accurately hit the backs of several people. They were suddenly ambushed. The bodies of the enemy soldiers who were hit by the arrows fell forward due to inertia. They faced the ground, their faces smashing into the ground and dragging some distance. Their companions nearby heard the movement, and immediately knew that their pursuers were nearby. They were horrified. General, the enemy has caught up. The sound of horse hooves behind them made them panic. They had finally shaken off their pursuers. But why did they come after them again? The general said, "Based on the enemy's movements, I think there aren't many pursuers. We can fight." Jiang Pingji rode Little White and charged for several feet. When dozens more people died under her sword, she acutely noticed that the enemy in front of her had stopped running and was about to get into formation to fight against them. She curled the corners of her lips and revealed a bloodthirsty smile. She raised her hand and waved her sword, accurately hitting down the stray arrows that were shot at her. She raised her sword high. Kill! Thousands of feet away from the northeast camp, the two armies collided and launched a swift and violent charge. Jiang Pingji happily harvested heads. It was really hard on Xieze, who was worried about her. He was afraid that his lord would be injured if he made a mistake. She's simply a lunatic. The enemy's general's face was ashen. How could he have imagined that Jiang Pingji would dare to run out of the camp, with 1,000 or 2,000 people in chase after and intercept them? It would be fine if it was during the day, but visibility was obstructed at night. It was very easy to lose sight of the enemy and encounter unknown dangers. Jiang Pingji was like a hothead, but she still caught up with them with great precision. Of course, at that moment, he still did not know that the lunatic and hothead he mentioned were Huang Song's mortal enemies in this battle. The two armies fought and quickly rushed into a mess. It was like two different colored waves colliding with each other, merging and mixing with each other. In a chaotic battle, it was easy to accidentally injure one's own side, but Jiang Pingji did not have this concern. She killed a child with one slash of her sword. Sometimes, she could even kill a group of them with one slash. Xieze could only bitterly follow his lord with his trusted subordinates. Wherever his lord went, he would go and help her clean up the small fries. He did this to protect Jiang Pingji, but it also exposed her position. The enemy did not know Jiang Pingji's identity, but someone who could be protected by so many soldiers must be a big fish. Unknowingly, Jiang Pingji steadily pulled the aggro. Even though the enemies came one after another, no one could hurt her. The battle lasted for more than an hour. Jiang Pingji steadily won the title of best of the match. Xieze panted and shook his hands. Chapter 1324. Inhuman. Was she still human? For more than an hour, she continuously brandished her sword and killed people. Didn't the lord's hands feel tired? He saw clearly that his lord did not reduce the frequency of her attacks from beginning to end. She even fended off the enemy's sneak attacks. No matter how sharp the lord's sword was, it required a lot of strength to cut through flesh and bones. How many people did the lord kill that night? How many times did she brandish her sword? Xieze did not know the exact number, but he could roughly estimate that it was a number that made his hands tremble. This was simply not something a human could do. Xieze suddenly thought of the sneak attack in Shanqing. He was the main general in charge of the sneak attack, but he failed at the last moment. Before he failed, he still wanted to fight with all his might and kill Jiang Pingji at the cost of his life. Now it seemed that the other party had indeed shown mercy, not to mention this life. Even if he sacrificed 10 lives, Xieze did not think he could kill the other party. "My lord, we have captured more than 10 captives." Xieze resisted the urge to complain, and obediently went to deal with the aftermath for Jiang Pingji. The enemy had suffered heavy casualties. Xieze raised his torch and looked around. He was almost dumbfounded by what he saw. Under normal circumstances, in a battle between two armies, the proportion of people dying on the spot was not high. Most of the soldiers died because they could not receive medical attention. Xieze thought that he could capture many wounded soldiers. He did not expect that only a few of the enemies lying on the ground were alive. Most of them were dead. He looked carefully and realized that the way the enemy soldiers died was very similar. Either their necks were cut off, or their vital parts were accurately shot. Almost all of their injuries were enough to meet the king of hell on the spot. Even if Daluo came, he would not be able to save them. Seeing this, he inhaled a breath of cold air. Xieze thought that his martial arts skills were not bad. When he sparred with Li Yun on a daily basis, the chances of winning were 50-50. Even so, he did not dare to say that he could end the enemy's life with one shot. It was not difficult to kill a person, but it was difficult to kill them all. His lord had done it. The problem was that she was his lord, not a general who charged and broke through enemy lines. His lord was the backbone of the overall situation. The strategists gave advice and suggestions for his lord. The generals attacked cities and conquered territories for his lord. The three parties had a clear division of labor. In the end, as a military general, Xieze was ruthlessly crushed by his lord in the field that she was good at, and trampled on over and over. Could Xieze say that he was always worried about losing his job? Even though there were countless things he wanted to complain about in his heart, Xieze looked very serious and calm on the surface, giving people a feeling that he was exceptionally reliable. Jiang Pingji was sitting on the stool, the god-slaying sword casually inserted into the ground beside her feet. When she heard Xieze's voice, she raised her head and looked at him. There are still living captives? Xieze. Sure enough, his lord was killing with every slash. It was obvious that she didn't want the enemy to live. Jiang Pingji raised her hand to wipe off the blood. Even though she was full of energy, the warm-up had made her sweat. Her sweat mixed with the enemy's blood almost smeared her face. Take them back and lock them up. Jiang Pingji sniffled, a look of disgust appearing in her eyes. She raised her hand and wiped it on her armor, then used a relatively dry part to wipe the blood off her face. The feeling of blood on her skin was truly unbearable. Right, we can also interrogate him. It would be good if we can get some information about Bogeo. If we can't, lock him up until the end of the war. Xieze cupped his fists and said, Understood. Jiang Pingji asked, Right, did you catch any of the enemy's generals? Xieze turned around and waved his hand. Immediately, soldiers brought over two people who were tied up like palm sticks. The two were not far from Jiang Pingji. Most generals had good hearing, so they clearly heard the conversation between Jiang Pingji and Xieze. The most important thing was how Xieze addressed Jiang Pingji. He called her lord. What did that mean? The two of them looked beet red, their gazes dull. Even the large and small wounds on their bodies could not distract them. Who knew that the rumored Duke of Lanting would personally lead troops and chase after the enemy troops in the middle of the night? If they had known that Jiang Pingji was such a suicidal person, they would have sent all their troops and only had eyes and hearts for Jiang Pingji. These 3 words were enough to kill her. Jiang Pingji casually glanced at the two of them and smiled warmly. Are you under Bogeo's command? The two of them were silent. It wasn't that they had never seen Jiang Pingji before. Back then, Jiang Pingji and Huang Song had joined forces to attack Mengzhan of Zhangzhou. The troops under the two camps had even spent the new year together. It was nighttime now, and they were so far away. Who could recognize Jiang Pingji's bloodstained face? Not to mention them. Even her mother couldn't recognize her. One of them stiffened his neck and said, If you want to kill me or dismember me, just do as you please. Why waste your breath? Jiang Pingji actually nodded and said, What you said makes sense. Keeping the two of you alive would be a waste of my military rations. After all, we don't have enough rations. 2 more people means 2 more mouths to feed. However, I love peace and don't like to kill. She smiled, revealing a set of neat white teeth. The surrounding atmosphere became eerily silent. Xieze could not help but turn around and cover his face. His lord said that she loved peace and didn't like to kill. Even if he could go against his conscience to say that, he wouldn't recognize the corpses of the enemy troops lying on the ground. Did he feel guilty saying that? The 2 captives were also shocked by Jiang Pingji's actions. For a moment, they did not know how to respond. In short, there was no way to complain. As they spoke, the sound of horses' hooves could be heard from afar. Their eyes lit up, but they soon dimmed again. The people who came were not Huang Song's troops. They were all there to support Jiang Pingji. My lord, Jiang Pingji said, the matter here has been settled. Send someone to clean up the battlefield. Dispose of the corpses that need to be disposed of. Don't keep them. The corpses of the enemy soldiers were burned and buried on the spot. The corpses of their own soldiers could be left with an urn for their souls to return to their hometown in the future. She waved her hand and jumped onto the back of the little white horse. Drowsiness overwhelmed her, and she couldn't help but yawn. Jiang Pingji's work and rest schedule had always been regular. After working hard for most of the night, she was more or less sleepy. She led the troops back to the camp. She asked someone to prepare a bucket of clean water for her to wash off the dirty blood on her body. She washed herself clean and slept. After the war, Han Yu and Wei Xi could work overtime. She was in charge of recuperating and building up her energy. After exercising, she bathed and slept. The quality of her sleep was exceptionally good. Huang Song's side was not so comfortable. Tonight's night attack had been planned for a long time. It was a sneak attack to pull back the fallen morale. He waited anxiously in the main tent. He did not sleep all night. His heart sank even more when the sky turned bright. Report. Just as he was feeling disheartened, there was movement outside. Huang Song's spirits were lifted. Tell me quickly, how's the battle situation? The messenger said dejectedly. The enemy has been on guard for a long time. Our troops could not retreat in time and were entangled by the enemy. Huang Song took 2 steps back in disbelief. If his right hand was not supporting himself on the table, he would have lost his composure. Chapter 1325. Before the sneak attack, Huang Song had been mentally prepared for the possibility of failure. When the reality was right in front of him, he couldn't accept it. He was mentally prepared, but he didn't expect to lose so thoroughly. He had sent out thousands of troops, but only 200 or so returned safely. The rest were either killed in battle or captured by the enemy. How could they fight this war? Huang Song felt that he needed some time alone. When everyone heard the result of the meeting, they immediately fell silent. They lowered their heads and didn't dare to look up at Huang Song's face. They had high expectations for the sneak attack. They didn't expect the enemy to know in advance and have already made preparations. This was really unexpected. Huang Song wasn't someone who would admit defeat easily. He said, "Does anyone have any other good ideas?" The group of people discussed until dawn. They were especially tired. After all, they were all awakened from their beds by Huang Song's men. Cheng Jing looked normal, but he was actually a little tired. After the meeting, he returned to his tent. Before he had time to wash up, a report came from outside. His heart skipped a beat. He mistakenly thought that it was his Lord Huang Song calling for him. He said, "Who's outside?" As soon as he finished speaking, an unfamiliar male voice came from outside. The other party's elegant words had a Hu County accent. Cheng Jing vaguely guessed the other party's identity. He said in a low voice, "Come in." The person was a man dressed in a dark brown scholar's robe. To make it easier for him to move, this person's wide sleeves were tied up with wrist guards. He looked less elegant and refined, but more agile and valiant. This person exchanged a few words with Cheng Jing. Cheng Jing invited him to take a seat. The other party was a little cautious and sat down with slight awkwardness. As intelligent as Cheng Jing was, he naturally guessed the purpose of this person's visit. As expected, the other party stiffly changed the topic to last night's sneak attack. At present, not many people knew about the situation of the battle. This person in front of him belonged to this group. He had come this time to find out more information. Cheng Jing calmly stated the result. The person's eyes widened, as if he couldn't believe the result. How could it be? The other party stammered. A lot of sweat appeared on his forehead, and his eyes flickered. Cheng Jing said, "Victory and defeat are common in war. Isn't it normal for the enemy to be one step ahead?" The other party laughed dryly in response to Cheng Jing's words, but his heart was beating like a drum. He could not help but be nervous and afraid. If Huang Song lost, he would definitely be punished by Jiang Pingji. Based on Jiang Pingji's deeds in the past few years, this woman could be said to be magnanimous, but in some aspects, she was exceptionally petty. She could even be said to seek revenge for the smallest grievance. Cheng Jing's eyes were like an ancient well, calm and tranquil. He saw through the thoughts of this person with a single glance, and laughed coldly in his heart. "Sir, are you worried that my master will not be able to defeat Lu Shi?" Cheng Jing's sudden question scared the man so much that his heart almost stopped beating. He was like a frightened cat whose fur was standing on end. How could this be? The other party raised his hand to wipe the sweat off his forehead and said sheepishly, Although Lu Shi is famous, my lord is not weaker than him. The outcome of the battle had yet to be decided, so it was still too early to make a judgment. How could I dare to boost other people's morale and diminish my lord's prestige? Cheng Jing snorted coldly and declined to comment. He was extremely disgusted with two-faced people, and the person in front of him was one of them. This person was born in Jianghe County and had lived there for generations. He had used many underhanded methods to obtain exorbitant profits. The fertile land in Jianghe County had been occupied by his family and a few other families. Almost all the local people were cheap tenants under their control. They even secretly engaged in illegal human trafficking. Before Lu Shi went to Hu County, these families were the local tyrants of Jianghe County. The people lived in poverty and could not see any hope. After Lu Shi took over Hu County, these local tyrants were slowly subdued and suppressed by him. They behaved themselves for a while. Previously, when Jiang Pingji pretended to be sick, they heard rumors that she did not have long to live. Their hearts were alive again. Coincidentally, Huang Song had sent someone to persuade them to rebel. This group of people took advantage of the situation and directly betrayed Jiang Pingji. As a result, Jianghe County was lost. They waited and waited, burning 3 joss sticks a day, hoping that Jiang Pingji would quickly kneel down. Unexpectedly, she recovered from her illness. Not only did she recover from her illness, but the situation on the battlefield slowly favored her. Huang Song was also forced to abandon Qinzhou and retreat from Jianghe County. If they had known that Jiang Pingji's life was so tenacious, they would not have sided with Huang Song so decisively. They would have at least watched for a while longer. It was too late to say anything now. They only hoped that Huang Song could turn defeat into victory and turn the tables. However, this seemed to be an extravagant hope. Cheng Jing said, "If there is nothing else, please make yourself at home." It was obvious that he wanted to chase them away. The man looked embarrassed. He knew that he was not welcomed by Cheng Jing. He had no choice but to bow and leave. Cheng Jing did not like him, not only because he was two-faced, but also because he did not have the slightest bit of self-awareness. Could he not see what kind of person he was? To Huang Song, they were just tools that could be thrown away after he was done using them. However, they thought too highly of themselves and overestimated themselves. Cheng Jing furrowed his brows and called someone over. He instructed, "Send someone to keep an eye on them. Report to me immediately if there is any movement." For such people, Cheng Jing did not expect them to have such things as loyalty. Even at this critical juncture, they did not forget to sound out the situation. It was obvious what kind of people they were. They had sided with Huang Song because of Lu Shi's decline. Who knew if they would betray Huang Song for the same reason? In the face of profit, all moral principles could be put aside. Yes, Cheng Jing was right. This person really had the intention of jumping ship. Huang Song's ship was about to sink. Of course they had to think of a way to save themselves. How could they save themselves? They had to think of a way. This is not very good, is it? After all, we betrayed Lu Shi. Now we have to betray Huang Song. Will Lu Shi accept this? What's not good about it? Those who achieve great things don't bother with trifles. As long as we can make a great contribution to Lu Shi, even if Lu Shi does not put us in an important position, he will not be able to settle old scores. The man rolled his eyes and said impatiently, "Huang Song has lost thousands of troops this time. He only has Haozhou left. What do you think his chances of winning against Lu Shi are? It is obvious that he will lose. I'm afraid it will be difficult to salvage the situation." In troubled times, moral principles were even cheaper than feces in a cesspit. Feces could nourish the soil, so what was the use of moral principles? There was no lack of loyal and unyielding people in the world, but these people were too arrogant and few would go along with others. Most of them were opportunists. As long as they offered enough benefits, Lu Shi would be tempted. His companion was still hesitant. He sighed. "Alas, what should we do? If we had known this would happen, we wouldn't have thought about it." After all the twists and turns, they still had to go to Jiang Pingji's camp. They had wasted so much effort. What's the use of saying this now? Finding a way out as soon as possible is the right way. Once Huang Song is defeated, we won't be able to get anything out of it. My lord, this is the account for last night's battle. Wei Si and the rest finished working overnight. Jiang Pingji had just woken up when she delivered the results of the night's work. It included the number of casualties and various losses. The latter was to be recorded in the general ledger, while the former was to be distributed after the war. How many people died in a war? Depending on the degree of death, injury, and disability, the level of compensation and benefits would be different. One could imagine how heavy the workload was. These were things that Wei Si would be busy with in the future, but he had no regrets. Back then, when Jiang Pingji entrusted him with the heavy responsibility of compensating the bereaved after the war, he knew how heavy the burden was. Jiang Pingji took a closer look. The number of casualties and losses were within her acceptable range. Compared to her loss, Huang Song's heart should be trembling with heartache, right? She called the others over and inquired in detail about the construction progress of the camp. It wasn't a detailed matter, but she grasped the key points steadily. The others didn't dare to skimp, so their efficiency was naturally high. Han Yu said, Huang Song failed in his sneak attack last night. He probably won't mobilize his troops in the next 2 days. If he doesn't move, I will, Jiang Pingji said. War is different from other things. It's best to end the battle quickly. Once winter came, it would be difficult to fight a war. The soldiers' winter clothing was also a huge expense. Han Yu asked, My lord, do you want to initiate the attack? Jiang Pingji nodded. She didn't want to fight a protracted war with Huang Song. This year, Hu County had lost 70% to 80% of its grain production. The loss made her heart ache. In order to avoid financial problems, she could only think of ways to save money. Han Yu said, That's good. Our army can take advantage of Huang Song's low morale. Jiang Pingji also inquired about the training of the troops. Xieze and the others didn't dare to delay, and told her everything in detail. When she was done, it was time for lunch. Smoke rose from the back of the camp, and the air was filled with the fragrance of rice. The idle spectators who witnessed everything were speechless. They finally realized that they had been tricked by Jiang Pingji. Lao Siji Lianmeng. Streamer, you've opened my eyes. What happened to the intense battle with blood splattering everywhere? What happened to the enemy abandoning their helmets and armor, and being utterly defeated? They had wanted to talk in private before, but they never expected that the veteran players would still fail in the hands of the streamer. Tudafetio. #doghead. The streamer is still as naughty as ever. Are you happy being naughty? It was clearly Huang Song who ambushed her, and was beaten back by her. They didn't expect her to make it sound so vague and ambiguous, leading the veteran players to fail miserably. Fukidujuo. I feel sorry for the programmers of Weibo, and the servers that died unjustly. Weibo has crashed all morning. They died unjustly. Jiang Pingji spread her hands and shrugged. Was it her fault? The benevolent saw benevolence and the wicked saw filth. What she said was the truth. Who asked them to misunderstand? Jiang Pingji smiled as she looked at the streaming room that had failed miserably. Her already radiant mood rose by a notch. Perhaps the heavens couldn't stand it anymore, and found someone to make things difficult for her. Jiang Pingji sneered as she listened to the whole thing. She asked the people around her meaningfully. Are they trying to discuss Bogeo? Or are they trying to disgust me? The people who had betrayed her had actually turned over a new leaf. They had even sent people to secretly express goodwill to her, hinting that they could assist her in eradicating Huang Song. She had seen thick-skinned people, but she had never seen anyone so thick-skinned. Sorry, in her case, there was no turning back for the prodigal son. There was only death. Yang Si furrowed his brows and said, Could it be that Huang Song sent them to feign surrender? Jiang Pingji said, Bogeo knows my temperament. He wouldn't do such a stupid thing. Even if he wanted to feign surrender, he definitely wouldn't choose these people. She and Huang Song had also been friends of scoundrels for a while. They had a good time together. Although they hadn't confided in each other, Huang Song was a meticulous person. He had an accurate understanding of others. She didn't believe that Huang Song didn't know how she treated traitors. Yang Si revealed a look of disgust. In that case, this is their own idea? Jiang Pingji said. This is a group of short-sighted idiots. When they saw that Jiang Pingji was seriously ill, they thought that she couldn't make it, so they turned to Huang Song. Now that Huang Song had failed, they felt that Huang Song couldn't make it. They were anxious to turn to her. Yangzi rolled his eyes and laughed. How does my lord intend to deal with these people? There's no harm in. Make use of them, then throw them away after using them? There's no harm in doing so, Jiang Pingji said. I'm not so incompetent that I need these useless people to deal with Bogeo. They don't even know what kind of people they are. Do they really think that they're rare commodities, and that they can pick and choose among the feudal lords? Yang Si saw that Jiang Pingji was angry, so he didn't say anything. Han Yu asked, Then what does my lord mean? Jiang Pingji sneered. Chapter 1327. Since Jiang Pingji, the god of slaughter, had spoken, Yang Si, Han Yu, and the others couldn't stop her. Yang Si was better. He had followed Jiang Pingji for some years. He knew his lord's temperament very well. Han Yu wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. After the meeting, Yang Si approached Han Yu and said, Why do you look like you have something on your mind? Han Yu glanced at Yang Si and didn't say anything. His expression was cold and distant. Ordinary people would have left, but Yang Si was different. He came up to Han Yu. He said, Are you worried that my lord will lure those people here and kill them? Han Yu finally opened his mouth and said slowly, It's not good for my lord's reputation. Yang Si said, Some people are like this. They want their reputation but lose it. If they want their reputation, they have to suffer for it. Only our aides worry about my lord's reputation. She doesn't care about it at all. Zishao has been busy all these years. I've never seen him relax the storytelling team that he built up. Who else could it be for? Isn't it all for my lord? Zishao is probably the most tired one for my lord to have such a good reputation. But my lord is capricious. She's not the only one who's unhappy. She can make a whole family unhappy. Han Yu said in a low voice. From what you said, you have a lot of complaints about my lord? Yang Si laughed. You're really a bad person. Are you trying to get information out of me? Han Yu said coldly. A gentleman doesn't avoid the beauty of others, and doesn't talk about their evil. Don't measure the heart of a gentleman with your own mean measure. Yang Si wasn't angry. Han Yu's temperament was like that. He was so honest that he wanted to be beaten up. Oh, the point was that Yang Si couldn't beat him. Yang Si said, It's not that I have complaints about my lord. People have thousands of temperaments. It's rare to meet a lord who is straightforward and not stupid. I just said that to tell you that my lord doesn't care so much about her reputation. She really wants to kill you. Speaking of their lord, she was also a very strange person. If one were to say that she was honest, she was sometimes glib-tongued. If one were to say that she was unrestrained, she would never bend when it was time for her to be upright. If one were to say that she was stingy, she would be willing to part with her wealth. If one were to say that she was magnanimous, if someone betrayed her once, she would want to kill that person. There were thousands of languages in the world, but Yang Si couldn't think of any words that could accurately describe his lord, let alone define her. It was probably because of this that she was able to get along well with everyone. Qiguan Rang was cautious. He only used 70% of his strength in everything, and left himself some leeway. However, he did not hold back in front of his lord. Feng Jin was born in an aristocratic family, and was the precious son of a noble family. No matter how good the Feng family's upbringing was, he was born with an air of nobility that separated him from others. In the end, this flower of the rich and powerful world was willing to submit to her master, and help him with all her might. It had to be said that she was very capable. Feng Zhen and Wei Xi were each other's best friends. One was a playboy, while the other was an upright and elegant gentleman. Two completely different styles, yet they could get along harmoniously. However, it did not mean that the two of them could get along with the same master. In the end, the master did it. In the face of this situation, there was only one word in Yang Si's mind. All rivers run into the sea. Han Yu frowned. He was angry but powerless. You can't indulge the lord like this. Do you really think you're raising a daughter? Yang Si laughed and said, What a coincidence. Feng Longzi asked the same question a few years ago. Han Yu was speechless. Did he really raise her as his own daughter? Yang Si expressed that there was nothing wrong with this. After all, the Lord also treated them as the public's favorite. The relationship between the Lord and her subjects was very harmonious. My Lord's reputation is more important. Han Yu's heart wavered, but his mouth was still firm. Yang Si said casually, "The Lord can do what she wants to do. Isn't it our duty to clean up after her?" To put it bluntly, she was an old maid who cleaned up messes. Han Yu said, "What do you mean?" Yang Si said, "It doesn't matter what Lord does. What's important is what we should do after she's done. If their Lord's reputation was really hurt, shouldn't they think of a way to reverse it?" She couldn't possibly be worried that she wouldn't be able to protect her Lord's reputation and deal with the aftermath. So she stopped her actions and regulated her behavior. Han Yu was speechless. He finally understood how the Lord's unruly temper came about. It was all because of these people's indulgence. Han Yu had a belly full of bitterness, but in the end, he had to fall into the mire with Yang Si. While Jiang Pingji was sharpening her knife, the pitiful fence-sitters still didn't know what was going on. Instead, they were delighted by Jiang Pingji's deliberately ambiguous attitude. However, they didn't dare to make any moves. After all, they were still in Huang Song's territory. They also needed to find an opportunity to show their role. Little did they know that what they thought was flawless was all in Cheng Jing's eyes. Cheng Jing was furious and directly informed Huang Song of the matter. Huang Song was silent for a long time. His eyebrows looked gloomy under the flickering candlelight. "My lord, this matter." Cheng Jing was a little hesitant. It would be fine if Huang Song directly got angry, but he didn't react at all, which was worrying. Huang Song said, "Yumo, thank you for telling me about this. Otherwise, I'm afraid I would have been kept in the dark." Cheng Jing said, "Those two-faced villains are not worthy of your grief, my lord." "Grief?" Huang Song smiled. "I'm not grieving over this. On the contrary, I feel pity for them and their brains." Cheng Jing was surprised. Huang Song said, "Lanting hates people who betray her the most, not to mention people who betray her repeatedly." Cheng Jing hesitated. According to those people, Lu Shi seems to have the intention to accept them. This isn't like her. She doesn't have the tolerance to accept people who have betrayed her. Huang Song shook his head. If she really did accept them, it wouldn't be her. Do you still remember that when Lanting first entered Chongzhou, her father, Lu Zhongqing, wanted to matchmake her with the aristocrats of Chongzhou? But because a few people didn't know what was good for them and rashly humiliated her, she vented her anger on the entire family without saying a word. She's not a person who will compromise for the sake of benefits. Anyone with a discerning eye would know that Jiang Pingji feigned civility with the aristocrats of Chongzhou. If she built a good relationship with them, she would even get help from them. What happened in the end? To put it bluntly, she couldn't stand being wronged. She could make others feel wronged, but if others made her feel wronged, she could punch them to death. She could be indifferent to the great benefits of Chongzhou, let alone others? Cheng Jing asked. "My lord, do you mean that Lu Shi has other plans?" "There's no harm in fulfilling their wishes. We can also take advantage of the situation and make use of them." Huang Song's eyes darkened and he sneered. "Fulfill their wishes and give them some confidential information so that they can happily come to Lanting and claim credit. If Lanting sincerely accepts them, she'll fall into our trap. If she has other plans, it's just as well. We can use her to clean up the family. Such villains are indeed an eyesore." Chapter 1328. Cheng Jing sighed. "This kind of person is not worthy of my lord's anger. Just leave this matter to me." Huang Song's expression was still not good. Even though the person who betrayed him was a fence-sitter, he still minded and was unusually angry. However, with Cheng Jing's persuasion, Huang Song calmed down a little. With a calm expression he said, "I'll leave this matter to Yumo." Cheng Jing bowed and replied, "Yes." Courting death was not scary. What he was afraid of was being hated by both Jiang Pingji and Huang Song at the same time. Although Cheng Jing always acted like a gentleman, being a gentleman did not mean that he was honest and inflexible. If he really schemed against someone, the other party would willingly help him count the money after being betrayed by him. In the words of the live stream viewers, which of these think tanks and strategists did not cut the black and white? Which fat fish did not take the bait when they acted as bait? Others thought that they had taken advantage of the situation and succeeded in their scheme, but they did not know that the other party was secretly watching the show. Not long after Qingjing's scheme, the fat fish took the bait. Is this news true? Of course it's true. The person who spoke was the man who had visited Qingjing earlier. His companion was still a little worried, and felt that the document in his hand was a little hot. Then tell me the details in detail. Qingjing is also an old fox. How could he be so careless as to let you steal this? The man said, listen to me in detail. It turned out that Qingjing felt embarrassed when he forcefully sent him away. Yesterday, he met him and invited him to sit in his tent for a while. The two of them had not exchanged greetings for long, when Qingjing received the battle document sent by Huang Song. He hid the document in the bedroom behind the tent. At that moment, because of the dry weather and the soldiers' carelessness, sparks from the bonfire splashed onto the tent and caused a fire, burning several tents nearby. Qingjing thought that the document had been burned, but he did not know that the man had taken advantage of the chaos to steal all of them. This fire came too coincidentally. His companion still had doubts in his heart. The man said, what's so strange about this? It's not uncommon for a camp to catch fire. Do you think this is a trap? His companion hesitated and said, it looks like it. Although autumn was dry and there was a lot of withered grass, making it easy for the tents to catch fire, the timing made him a little suspicious. The man said, Qingjing was almost burned by the fire. A small part of his left hand was burnt. If the soldiers hadn't put out the fire in time, he would have died. If this was really a trap, what was Qingjing plotting? He would have sent people to capture us long ago. Why would he play the trick of injuring himself to gain our confidence? His companion said, it's not unreasonable to say that. If Qingjing had set up a trap, it meant that Huang Song already knew that they had the intention to rebel. How could he not do anything? Now that he thought about it, he must have been thinking too much. His companion asked, then what do we do now? The man said, to avoid any undue delay, we naturally have to pass the news to Lu Shi before Huang Song mobilizes his troops. Only then can we seize the opportunity to make meritorious service. Although the battle document was confidential, it had a time limit. They had to act before the document became invalid. His companions were a little worried. If they really betrayed Huang Song, and they continued to stay here with Huang Song, they would lose their lives. He told the man what he was worried about, and the two of them came up with a plan to escape to Lu Shi that very night. There were a total of 5 powerful families that sought refuge in Jianghe district. The 5 families were connected by marriage, and their interests were already inseparable. Naturally, they had to act together. They immediately split up to discuss with a few others. Finally, they decided to escape at midnight that night. Qingjing had long been watching them. Naturally, he would arrange for informants, so every word of their conversation fell into Qingjing's ears. He snorted coldly and said, they don't know that their death is near. The camp occupied a large area, and the personnel were complicated. If they had trusted subordinates as spies, it would not be difficult to disguise themselves as ordinary soldiers and sneak out. Qingjing specially opened the back door for them, so their escape was exceptionally smooth. Jiang Pingji had even prepared backup for them. Seeing backup, the few of them instantly felt relieved. Although they did not show it on their faces, they felt a little proud. Although they had betrayed Jiang Pingji, now that they had returned, she still accepted them generously. How could they not feel proud? From another perspective, they could also see how important this confidential document was. They had secrets in their hands, and the weight of the secret was equivalent to the weight of their own. When they arrived at the camp, the sky was still gloomy, but their moods were incomparably radiant. From afar, they could vaguely see countless tents prostrating on the ground. Truly stepping into Jiang Pingji's territory, they felt extremely at ease. Little did they know that the god-slaying sword in Jiang Pingji's hand was already thirsty. Where is the Lord now? One of them asked the soldier who was waiting for them. The soldier replied respectfully, "It's still early. The Lord should be training the troops at the training ground. Please wait for a while." They did not suspect anything. One by one, they waited in the main tent for Jiang Pingji's arrival. Even if they did not know how to read the situation, they did not dare to complain. After all, the situation was stronger than they were. If Jiang Pingji asked them to wait, they had to wait. What was Jiang Pingji doing now? Just as the soldier had said, she was warming up and training the troops at the training ground. As the Lord, how could she convince the warriors and make them loyal to her? Apart from having a charismatic personality, her fists had to be strong. To make them respect her at all times, Jiang Pingji went there every few days. This made life difficult for Qin Gong and the others. Jiang Pingji occasionally beat up the newly promoted newcomers. Most of the time, she looked for them to fight one-on-one or gang up on them. Although she had a sense of propriety and would not embarrass them, it was a pain in the ass to be completely suppressed by the Lord. Others would still think that the two of them were evenly matched. As a result, the old generals did not like to spar with Jiang Pingji. When they saw her at the training ground, they looked bitter. Qin Gong, Xie, and the others had not learned their lesson. They were eager to try. When they could not avoid her, Jiang Pingji would stop for a while. "What? They're here?" Jiang Pingji was wiping the sweat on her neck with a cloth. She looked refreshed. On the other hand, Qin Gong and the others looked as if they had been plucked by a demon. "I'll go over now. You guys continue training." The first sentence was directed at the soldier who sent the message. The second sentence was directed at Qin Gong and the others. "Yes." Jiang Pingji left. The two who had escaped heaved a long sigh of relief. Jiang Pingji strode into the main tent. She did not even look at the few people. She sat upright in the main seat and held the god-slaying sword in front of her. With such an attitude, not to mention being courteous, it could not even be considered friendly. Yangxi said, "Your Highness, these are brought by these gentlemen. Please have a look." He held Huang Song's battle document in front of Jiang Pingji with both hands. She picked it up with one hand and opened it with a swoosh. She read through it quickly. Jiang Pingji's attitude was a mystery. The few people's optimistic moods sank. They held their breaths and waited for her reaction. After a while, Chapter 1329. Their hearts skipped a beat. They were so scared that their faces turned ashen. Fake surrender? Where did that come from? They were sincerely betraying Huang Song and pledging allegiance to Jiang Pingji. For a moment, fear and grievance filled their hearts, but they could not care less. They hurriedly explained to Jiang Pingji, "Why did you say that, Master Lanting? We are sincerely surrendering." "Sincerely? TSK, then your sincerity is really cheap," Jiang Pingji said. "Are you really stupid, or are you pretending to be? Do you really think I'm an ignorant woman in the backyard? This so-called document is obviously fake. Do you really think I'll take the bait so easily?" Jiang Pingji's tone was very calm, but when it fell into people's ears, they felt a heavy weight pressing on their hearts. It was frightening. They were so scared that their faces turned pale. One of them immediately bent down to pick up the document on the ground. He read it carefully from beginning to end. No matter how they looked at it, the document was real. There were no flaws. Why did Jiang Pingji say it was fake? They did not know that she did not need to guess to know that it was fake. Her understanding of Huang Song was much deeper than Huang Song's understanding of her. It was impossible for the people in front of her to gain Huang Song's trust. The possibility of them getting the so-called confidential document was also very small. If secrets could be obtained so easily, why would they fight a war? They could just play spy games. Even if the document was real, Jiang Pingji did not intend to use it. The more critical the situation, the more calm one had to be. Even if Huang Song was like a grasshopper at the end of autumn, Jiang Pingji would not underestimate her enemy. Instead of believing in a secret letter, whose authenticity was unknown, it was better to sit still and watch Huang Song reveal his fatal weakness in his impatience. She was not anxious. It was Huang Song who was anxious. Putting that aside, Jiang Pingji also needed an honorable reason to kill the people in front of her. Wasn't fake surrender a good excuse? As long as she insisted that the document was fake, and that these people were enemies sent by Huang Song to fake surrender, wouldn't she have a reason to kill them? Although they did not know Jiang Pingji's plan, they were aware of the danger they were in. They were so scared that they broke out in a cold sweat. How dare I belittle you, Duke Lanting? They had looked down on them in the past, but Jiang Pingji's fists were tough. She made them swallow back all the words that they wanted to say. Huang Song, my son, is selfish and treats his subordinates harshly. The Yuans are rampant and domineering, and we have suffered greatly. I've heard that the Duke of Lanting is a man of great righteousness, and has the appearance of a truly wise ruler. That's why we're willing to forsake the darkness and seek the light. This letter truly belongs to Huang Song. This person spoke with righteousness and awe-inspiring righteousness. If he was given a background, it would definitely be a bright and clear universe, a clear sky and bright sun. Jiang Pingji laughed. The audience in the streaming room was also in an uproar. Not last night's stars. What the hell? How shameless were these people? Fusha Rua Xiaomeng. This is totally refreshing. These people betrayed the host, didn't they? What a disgusting face. Being two-faced wasn't scary. What was scary was that the other party still had the courage to defend themselves. Even the word shameless wasn't enough to describe what they looked like. Fu Feng Jiling. I feel even more sorry for Huang Song, my baby. This group of people picked up their bowls to eat, then put them down to curse. That's enough. They surrendered to Huang Song willingly. Now that they've expelled Huang Song, they're still slandering him. This operation is simply too awesome. Fat Dun Fuyu. Tisk Tsk. Two completely different faces. I've really learned something new. The audience had been following the streaming room for nearly 10 years. They'd seen all kinds of ancient people from Jiang Pingji's perspective. There were so many characters, but almost none of them were as disgusting as these people. They were obviously good-looking, and had rather frightening appearances. But the way they ate was so unsightly. Jiang Pingji also sneered. I can't accept these compliments. When you betrayed me in Zhanghe District in Hu County, did you also say the same thing to Bogeo? You speak in human language when you see a ghost. And you speak in human language when you see a ghost. You have a sharp tongue, and your foundation in flattery is very deep. When they heard Jiang Pingji's words, they knew that she wouldn't believe them. Not only would she not believe them, but they would also be in trouble. As expected, Jiang Pingji said to the people outside the tent, Guards. As soon as she finished speaking, the soldiers entered in a line. Before they could resist, they locked their hands behind their backs. I've been wronged, Lord Lanting. I've been wronged. I've been wronged. I really didn't have any ulterior motives when I surrendered this time. Lord Lanting, please understand. My loyalty to you can be witnessed by the sun and the moon. I've been wronged, I've been wronged. Seeing such a situation, how could they still maintain their dignity? They immediately began to cry out their grievances. Every word was shouted out loud. Jiang Pingji knew that they were wronged. But that wasn't important. This kind of capricious villain was a scourge if left alive. He might stab her again someday. It was better to kill him to prevent future troubles. Jiang Pingji sneered. Take them all away. After beheading them, hang their heads outside the camp for Bogeo to have a good look. When they heard this, they struggled even more fiercely. The soldiers were not to be trifled with. Their palms were broad and powerful. They clamped them firmly like iron pincers, making it impossible for them to break free. Jiang Pingji glanced at the god-slaying sword. Her eyelids drooped slightly. These traitors were not worthy enough for her to draw her sword. Not long after, a few screams came from outside the tent. The heavy heads fell to the ground and rolled twice. Blood splattered on the ground and dyed the soil. Reporting, my lord. They've been beheaded. Jiang Pingji said, hang them. Remember to wash their faces, so that the enemy can see them clearly. At noon, Huang Song received the news. He laughed bitterly and said, Lanting still has an old temper. She killed them just like that. Cheng Jing was also surprised by Huang Song's understanding of Jiang Pingji. They were on opposing sides, but the lord still addressed her by her first name. Was this considered a form of love-hate relationship? Then should we still set up an ambush? Huang Song said. Lanting has most likely seen through that the document is fake. It's useless to set up an ambush. Instead, we'll make a fool of ourselves. Cheng Jing said. If that's the case, we can only make other plans. Before the sky had completely darkened, there was a commotion outside the camp. Reporting to my lord, the enemy outside the camp has issued a letter of challenge. Huang Song hurriedly took the letter of challenge. The handwriting on it was Jiang Pingji's. The content was in accordance with her usual style, sharp and domineering. Once again, he gathered everyone for a discussion. This letter of challenge caused even more waves. Lanting has stated that the two armies will have a decisive battle. Does anyone have a countermeasure? Everyone looked at each other. If the two armies confronted each other head-on, it would be a direct confrontation. The number of our troops is inferior to the enemy. If we confront each other now, it will be extremely disadvantageous for us. Someone said sarcastically, the two armies haven't even fought yet, but they're already praising the enemy. Chapter 1330. Lan Shui Yu. Awesome, my streamer. So there really was a letter of challenge in ancient times. Xingyue Tianyan. That's not the point. The point is that my mind is filled with Zhuge Liang sent a letter of challenge to us for a decisive battle tomorrow. How should we fight the enemy? Am I overthinking it? Or have I logged too much on Bilibili? I'm looking forward to the streamer and Huang Song quarreling in front of the battlefield. In this season, the days were short and the nights were long. The sky darkened early. Before the end of the broadcast, it was already dark outside. The battle would begin the next day. Jiang Pingji took her time tonight. Her slender fingers played with the bean-sized candlelight. No one knew what she was thinking. Unbeknownst to her, outsiders thought that Jiang Pingji was daydreaming. But she was actually investigating the surrounding environment. Because Huang Song's battle was very important, Jiang Pingji did not dare to take it lightly. She did not give Huang Song a chance to sneak an attack. Almost every day, she had to spread out her mental strength to investigate the enemy within 100 miles. There was no progress before, but today there was a different discovery. She furrowed her brows in deep thought. As she withdrew her mental strength, she guessed the origin of the troops. Tomorrow was the decisive battle. She did not want to be attacked by an unknown enemy halfway through the battle. Jiang Pingji shouted to the outside, "Quickly summon the generals. Tell them that I have something important to discuss." She suddenly shouted, "Qin Gong," and the others naturally rushed over without even taking off their armors. Tomorrow's decisive battle. Jiang Pingji glanced at the few of them and pointed to two newly promoted newcomers. The profession of a general was obtained through military merits. Not only did it require a certain amount of luck, but it also required a stage to perform. Jiang Pingji was quite generous in this aspect. This was also one of the reasons for the internal unity. She then said to Xieze, "Yuan Gui, you will lead the troops to guard the rear tomorrow." Xieze originally thought that there would be some people, but he was dumbfounded when he heard this. Why? Why was he the one guarding the rear? Xieze was the vanguard general. Logically, he should be the vanguard. She changed her mind at the last minute and transferred him to the rear. He plucked up the courage to ask. Jiang Pingji also gave him a reason. Jiang Pingji said seriously, "I just received a secret report. There will be changes in the battlefield tomorrow. I asked you to guard the rear out of consideration as a whole." Xieze nodded his head and stepped out to receive the order. He returned to his original valiant and high-spirited attitude, as if he could raise his spear and kill the enemy right now. Qin Gong was younger than Xieze, but he definitely had more experience on the battlefield than Xieze, so he was naturally more sensitive. There's a change in the battlefield tomorrow? Could it be that Huang Song still has some tricks up his sleeves? I'm not sure yet. We'll know tomorrow, Jiang Pingji said. Yuan Gui, you must guard the rear well. Don't let your guard down. Even though there were very few generals under her command who thought they were smart and made decisions on their own, those who were young and famous were always more impetuous. They were eager to perform meritorious deeds, so it was inevitable that they would drop the ball at critical moments. Jiang Pingji had to remind them from time to time to prevent them from being hot-blooded. Generals were a profession where their heads were tied to their waistbands. If their brains weren't good, how long could they live? After a round of discussion, Jiang Pingji closed the streaming room, washed up, and went to bed. She needed to rejuvenate herself. There would be a big battle the next day. At the same time, the troops led by Feng Ju were resting at a place dozens of miles away. The scouts sent out had also gotten a clear understanding of the situation at the front lines. Knowing that the decisive battle between his lord and Jiang Pingji had yet to begin, Feng Ju heaved a long sigh of relief. He had finally made it in time. A general hesitantly asked Feng Ju, "Military counselor, should we rush over to meet up with our lord tonight or?" Feng Ju shook his head and said thoughtfully, "If we rush over tonight, most of our troops will be exhausted. They won't have much combat power left. How can we help our lord tomorrow? It's better to let the army rest for a while. When the two armies face off tomorrow, you and I will lead the troops to launch a sneak attack from behind, while Lu Shi is lax. We'll take her by surprise and attack her when she's unprepared. This will definitely cause Lu Shi to panic. In this way, the pressure on our lord's side will be reduced." Feng Ju withdrew his troops from the front lines. In order to confuse Qiguan Rang, he specially led his troops to take a detour to mislead Qiguan Rang, making him think that he was not rushing to the front lines, but had sent his troops back to reinforce Haozhou. In other words, Jiang Pingji did not know that Feng Ju's troops had already arrived. In this way, Jiang Pingji would be defenseless when Feng Ju launched a sneak attack from behind tomorrow. How could they know that Jiang Pingji was different from them? She had long noticed Feng Ju's actions. The next day, the sky was dimly lit, and the morning sun shone faintly. The troops of the two armies confronted each other in the cold wind. Banners fluttered in the wind, and the battlefield was filled with a somber atmosphere. The banners with the word Lu, or Huang, written on them fluttered in the wind, making a loud sound. The swords and spears flashed with cold light, reflecting the resolute faces of their owners. The morale of the troops was twisted into a ball. The murderous aura of the military formation filled the sky, and even the air was cold. Under such an atmosphere, the salted fish in the streaming room did not dare to joke. Jiang Pingji was dressed in red clothes and silver armor. Her red tassel helmet covered most of her face, but it could not hide the undercurrent that surged in her eyes. Behind her, the troops wore bright armor and were in high spirits. Their morale had reached its peak. In the face of such a lineup, it was impossible for Huang Song's side to not feel pressured. However, he had no way out. Huang Song closed his eyes and opened them again. His eyes were calm. If it was in the past, fighting a war had to follow procedures. Nowadays, it was more and more casual. Fighting a war was fighting a war. Huang Song was not foolish enough to suggest a battle between generals. He knew that Jiang Pingji's martial strength alone was enough to challenge everyone, regardless of whether it was one-on-one, or a group fight. Under such circumstances, the troops of the two sides seemed to have no other activities other than fighting. They could not possibly let more than 200,000 people watch their lord chat in front of the battlefield. Could they? Beat the drums. At the command, the drummers pushed out hundreds of war chariots with big cowhide drums. Dong! 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 The sound of the war drums boosted the morale of the whole army. Jiang Pingji also raised her hand and waved, indicating that the war drums could begin. The military formation stretched for several miles. The two armies added up to more than 200,000 troops and horses. They had to rely on this method to transmit all kinds of information. The beating of the drums was not only to boost morale, but also to inform the troops. Everyone perked up. Those who were absent-minded came back to their senses. Those who were sleepy woke up. The big battle was about to begin. Jiang Pingji was the commander-in-chief for this battle. Although Luoyue was capable, he had been squatting in the rear to deal with security and border defense all year round. He did not have much actual experience in commanding troops. Regarding this, Luoyue was not the least bit unwilling. If the lord commanded the troops, it meant that she could not act recklessly. Qin Gong and the others rubbed their palms together. Every one of them was in high spirits. Without waiting for Jiang Pingji to give the order, the enemy troops could not hold back anymore. Shouts of "kill" resounded through the sky, causing pain in one's ears. The soldiers who carried the flags waved the flags. It was as if black clouds were floating in the sky. The soldiers who beat the drums worked even harder. Because they used all their strength to beat the drums, the muscles on their arms tightened. One arm was as thick as an ordinary person's thigh. Their oily sweat soaked their skin until it glistened. Jiang Pingji smiled, drew her sword and gave the order. Chapter 1331. The cavalry played a pivotal role on the battlefield. Without large-scale popularization or further development of firearms, the myth of the cavalry was almost unbreakable. It was not that the cavalry could not be dealt with, but the price paid was far greater than the gains. This was also the horror of the cavalry. The cavalry was extremely mobile. Whether it was a joint attack or a roundabout retreat, how could the two-legged people outrun the four-legged horses? Their ability to collide and kill was also one of the cornerstones of the cavalry myth. In addition, ancient wars were very dependent on military formations, which could be integrated into a whole, thus achieving a sublimation from quantitative change to qualitative change. Not only could the cavalry collide and cut the military formation, but it could also prevent the enemy from being able to form an effective defense or attack. Jiang Pingji's cavalry not only consisted of light cavalry, but also heavy cavalry that had defeated the northern borderline. One light cavalry and one heavy cavalry cooperated with each other. Whether it was an attack or something else, the effect was naturally stronger than that of a single unit. Huang Song attached so much importance to her that he naturally knew this. In order to deal with this terrifying cavalry battalion, he discussed with everyone for a long time and finally came up with a way to slightly restrain them. They adopted a more flexible and changeable military formation. At the same time, they avoided the sharp edge and lured the enemy into the formation, then strangled them. The cavalry that ran were wolves and tigers. The cavalry that fell into the swamp of the sea of people were lambs waiting to be slaughtered. Their ability was limited. In order not to let the enemy discover that there was something fishy about the military formation, Huang Song and the others also made some changes to the vanguard. This method was no problem for ordinary people, but for Jiang Pingji, it was superfluous. Not to mention her own spiritual ability, even the high-altitude camera in the streaming room could overlook the situation from a certain angle. She keenly discovered the characteristics of Huang Song's military formation and gave another order. The messenger received the order and immediately sent the message out. The rhythm of the bugle horn and military drums suddenly changed. At that moment, the heavy cavalry had already resisted the tide-like rain of arrows and was less than 100 feet away from the enemy's front line. Such a short distance was just a blink of an eye for the war horses that were running at full speed. The soldiers on horseback heard the order to change. They pulled the reins tightly to direct the war horses to change direction while they raised their thick shields and smashed the charging enemy heavily. The enemy used a joint attack technique to stab the war horses under the cavalry. Even though the war horses were wearing thick armor, they still neighed in pain. The heavy cavalry under Jiang Pingji burned a lot of money. The weight of the men and horses could be called human-shaped tanks. Along the way, it was the most violent and powerful suppression. That kind of strength was not something that an ordinary body of flesh and blood could withstand. They broke through in an instant, but they didn't go straight in. Instead, they charged towards the flanks of the enemy in a wide arc. It was even simpler for the light cavalry. After receiving the order, they immediately split into several groups and circled around to the enemy's flanks. From the looks of it, the cavalry is afraid? The soldiers under Huang Song's tent did not know what was going on. Only Huang Song and his men, who had been paying close attention to the battlefield, were shocked. The cavalry wasn't scared. They knew that there was a trap in front of them, so they didn't want to make unnecessary sacrifices. Instead, they decided to attack the two flanks where the defense was weaker. When Cheng Jing thought of this possibility, he secretly clenched his fists. At the same time, he was in disbelief. His opponent's reaction was too fast. Compared to Cheng Jing's calmness, Huang Song's reaction was much more obvious. Huang Song murmured, "Lanting, oh Lanting, you're really my nemesis." Even though his heart was heavy, Huang Song did not reveal a dejected expression. He was the lord. If he panicked, what would happen to his subordinates? Because the cavalry didn't really affect the enemy's main force. When the two armies collided, the situation of the battle could be said to be tragic. Jiang Pingji looked at the situation on the battlefield. She suppressed the urge to join the battle. Instead, she calmly commanded the dispatches and reinforcements. Watching from afar, Han Yu couldn't help but sigh. "My lord really has the demeanor of a brave general." Yang Si added, "My lord also has the wisdom of a strategist." Fortunately, there was only one lord like this. If there were a few more, wouldn't the strategists and generals lose their jobs and be laid off? At the same time, Wei Si had a solemn look on his face. He knew that the balance of the battlefield was slowly tilting towards his lord. However, Feng Ju, who was under Huang Song's tent, still hadn't appeared. This made him a little worried for no reason. Wei Si would not underestimate anyone who had lived in troubled times. After all, Feng Ju was an important minister who had once assisted His Majesty. While he was deep in thought, the front line was already in a mess. Not long after, there were corpses lying on the ground. The battle cries of the two sides not only resounded in the sky, but even the gravel on the ground trembled slightly. Luo Yu was in charge of the left wing, Qin Gong was the vanguard, and the right wing was led by Jiang Nongqin, who was newly promoted. Both sides infiltrated each other and fought each other. If not for the difference in clothes, they really wouldn't be able to tell who was the enemy. Someone had just killed the enemy with one foot, and then his body was pierced through by the enemy's weapon. Yang Si seemed very calm, but his eyes kept drifting in a certain direction. In fact, even if he sat on horseback, this altitude was not enough to cross over the wall of people. But he could not help but want to see. It didn't matter in the past, but after clarifying his intentions, he felt that there was nothing more torturous than the combination of civil and military. What was a general? It was a precarious profession, and the battlefield was so chaotic that even immortals could be accidentally injured. Sigh, how worrisome. Han Yu rolled his eyes, glanced at him, and asked, "What are you worried about?" "The situation is favorable to our army. What are you worried about?" Yang Si said, "You don't understand. This is concern." Han Yu sneered. "My son Han Run has been studying at the Golden Scale Academy for a long time. A single man who didn't even have a wife mocked him for not knowing how to care for his wife and daughter? Who gave him the courage?" Yang Si. Perhaps it was the Lord? Han Yu didn't have much contact with Jiang Nongqin, but he knew that she was unusually quiet. Although she was a woman, she was no less than an ordinary general. To be honest, in his opinion, Yang Si was a rotten piece of wood, and he really couldn't afford to be associated with her. If Yang Si knew about this, he would definitely explode in anger and draw his sword to hack Han Yu. Jiang Nongqin was leading the right wing to deal with the enemy. Because of her prestige in the army over the years, the generals under the Lord's command didn't dare to look down on her. Not to mention those ordinary generals who had been promoted. No one dared to protest or question her orders, so the situation on the right wing was relatively stable, and it was difficult for the enemy to expand their victory. On the one hand, she cooperated with the middle army to contain the enemy, and on the other hand, she joined forces with the middle army to make the enemy suffer. Looking at her like this, who wouldn't give her a thumbs up? They were not convinced by women, except for two exceptions. One was the unfathomable Lord, and the other was the dignified Captain Jiang. Although Jiang Nongqin was an old woman, there were many people who secretly liked her, but they just didn't have the guts to say it out. "Captain Jiang, there is a change in the rear." Chapter 1332. The battle at the front was in full swing, and Xie was so bored that he was almost moldy. However, military orders had to be obeyed. Even if there was nothing wrong, Xie still had to be alert and be extremely vigilant. "Have the scouts we sent out returned?" Xie paid attention to the battle situation at the front and ordered the soldiers to be ready for battle. Reporting to General, there is no news yet. The deputy general pressed the sword at his waist with his left hand, and looked at the front solemnly. He asked Xieze in a low voice, "General, why did the Lord send the general? Huang Song's troops are not as good as ours. He has already used up all his troops. How could he have the strength to launch a sneak attack?" For a general, there was no future without military merits. How did military merits come about? Naturally, they were piled up with the enemy's heads, hiding in the safer rear. They didn't even see the shadow of the enemy. Wasn't this a waste of time? Their lord's future was getting brighter and brighter. Once Huang Song was destroyed, she would be the ruler of all of Dongqing. It was a small peak of her life. They didn't know what the future would be. Did the Lord want to establish a stable country, or continue to expand? If it was the latter, it would be best. If it was the former, one less battle meant one less chance to be promoted. When the world was at peace, it would not be so easy for a general to be promoted. This time, being sent to the rear was equivalent to being on a cold bench. The deputy general who assisted Xieze was naturally worried. This is the Lord's order. We will follow it. She must have a reason for this arrangement. Let everyone be alert, so that the enemy doesn't take advantage of any loopholes. Compared to the deputy general's worry, Xieze was calm. He raised his hand, and took out a handkerchief from his armor to wipe the shiny shaft. He lowered his eyes and said, "If there is any trouble at the rear, the Lord will punish us. Neither you nor I can afford to bear the consequences." The deputy general thought of his lord's temper, and suddenly sweated profusely. Of all the people he questioned the Lord's orders? "I will do it now." The deputy general immediately left. Xieze recalled the deputy general's words and frowned slightly. Although he was not the Lord's diehard fan, the Lord made decisions like a god and rarely made mistakes. The Lord said that the enemy might launch a sneak attack at the rear, so this news was most likely true. The only problem was, when would the enemy appear? The rear was too comfortable, and the soldiers were more or less relaxed. This was not a good sign. Xieze could only send someone to constantly remind the soldiers in his tent not to be careless. Report. Just as the deputy general was about to report to Xieze, he heard a shout in his ear. What happened? The person said, "We found a bloodied warhorse just now." The deputy general was shocked and quickly said, "Let's go and take a look." It was a maroon warhorse. Its body was not as tall and strong as the heavy cavalry warhorses. It had a tubular body, a narrow chest, a long back, and shallow ribs. Although its back was narrow, it was strong and powerful. Its muscles were more developed than ordinary warhorses, and its fur was glossy. Those who were familiar with the breed of warhorses could tell at a glance that this horse was from the northern borderline, and definitely had the bloodline of the Fergana horse of Shalan. It was fast, had great endurance, and came and went like the wind. Of course, this kind of horse was also specially allocated to scouts to ensure their mobility, so that they could escape as soon as they discovered the enemy. The deputy general looked at the warhorse with a heavy expression. He raised his hand and touched the bloodstain. With a slight sniff, he knew that it was human blood and not horse blood. The soldier said, "Deputy General, this warhorse's abdomen is slightly injured." The deputy general looked in the direction that the soldier was pointing, and saw a palm-long wound on the side of the horse's abdomen. Some of the blood had already coagulated. With his many years of experience, he could tell at a glance what kind of sharp weapon had caused the wound. "The horse is back. Where is the person?" the deputy general asked. The soldier replied, "I didn't find him. When the horse came back, I didn't see anyone." The deputy general's heart sank. He vaguely guessed that the scout had died. He asked again, "Other than this horse, did any other horses come back?" The soldier shook his head. The deputy general quickly passed the news to Xieze. The mission of this batch of scouts was not to investigate the front, but the rear. Now they had been killed. If not for the fact that the horse knew the way and ran back with injuries, they probably wouldn't have found it. It could be seen that the Lord's guess was correct. There was indeed an enemy force hiding in the dark. Hearing the deputy general's words, Xieze's brows furrowed, leaving faint wrinkles between his brows. order the entire army to be on guard. He knew very well what kind of equipment his scouts were equipped with. Almost all of them were equipped with good horses that had both speed and endurance. Under such circumstances, they were still killed by the enemy. It could be seen that the enemy was not easy to deal with. If the warhorse hadn't come back on its own, Sieze wouldn't have known that the enemy had appeared. Not long after he issued the order, there was a rumbling sound from behind. The ground shook even more violently. Kill! Accompanied by thunderous shouts, a dense horde of enemies quickly appeared in their field of vision. The deputy general's warhorse was startled. He was shocked by the number of enemies. He called out to Sieze loudly, "General, the enemy is here." Sieze glanced at them and his face darkened. The enemy was less than 3 miles away. How did they do it so close? If the Lord hadn't warned them, the enemy would have launched a sneak attack, and the army would have suffered heavy losses. "What are you panicking for? Get into formation," Sieze shouted, as if he knew what was going on. 3 miles was nothing to the enemy cavalry. These cavalry were not easy to deal with. They were very skilled with their bows and arrows. Before they even got close, the arrows had already fallen. Sieze was calm. On one hand, he commanded the soldiers to block the arrows with the shield wall. On the other hand, he ordered the archers to shoot at the enemy under the protection of the shield wall. He tried to clear out the nearest wave of enemies. However, the distance between the two sides was too short. The archers couldn't shoot more than a few rounds. The enemy cavalry opened the way, and the troops behind them followed closely. There were tens of thousands of them. Seeing that the enemy cavalry was close, Sieze ordered the soldiers to line up with spears more than 10 feet long. They stabbed the enemy's warhorse's sternum, abdomen, and eyes. However, the mobility of the cavalry was a headache for all troops. The spears could only hinder them for a while. Jiang Pingji was the first to notice the unusual movements in the rear, but she didn't show it. Instead, she focused on the situation at the front. In order to deal with the sneak attack, she gave Sieze a lot of manpower. Not only was Sieze's military ability questionable, but the quality of his own troops were also questionable. When the news of the sneak attack came, everyone was shocked. Only Jiang Pingji was calm as usual. She said, "Believe in Yuan Gui." She had given the enemy a warning, which was equivalent to cheating. Jiang Pingji would definitely beat him up. Inexplicably, Sieze's little universe, desire, erupted. The enemy troops who launched the sneak attack were not bystanders. They were the people Feng Zhu had brought from the front lines of Wanzhou. Chapter 1333. Military advisor. This, Feng Zhu said in a hoarse voice. Lu Shi is indeed a terrifying person. He rarely admired anyone, but Jiang Pingji, who had made his plans fail time and time again, was definitely one of them. Those who guarded the rear under such circumstances were either people who were cautious and cowardly, or people who had foresight. Jiang Pingji could not be the former, so it could only be the latter. She had long guessed that Feng Zhu would lead the troops to attack the rear. What should we do now? The general looked anxious. His tough and rugged face was full of worry, and fine beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. What should we do? Feng Zhu said, "There's no turning back. Of course we fight." Should he order the army to retreat because the enemy was on guard? The general looked embarrassed, as if he had realized that he had asked a stupid question. Little did he know that Feng Zhu was in a difficult position. The troops he led to attack Jiang Pingji's rear and coordinate with the front line would more or less boost the morale of Huang Song's main force. If he withdrew his troops to avoid the enemy's vanguard, the morale of the front line would inevitably collapse, and they would be like stray dogs. Therefore, even if he had to fight to the death, he could not take a step back. The matter of Jiang Pingji's rear being attacked was not only heard by Jiang Pingji and the others, but also by Huang Song, who was overseeing the army in the middle. After thinking about it, Huang Song still could not guess the identity of the person until Cheng Jing's words woke him up. "Lord, that must be Huaijia's troops." Cheng Jing counted the time with his fingers. The unfamiliar troops that attacked Jiang Pingji's rear must have been led by Feng Zhu. There was no one else but him. Huang Song was delighted. He quickly ordered his men to continue beating the drums to boost the morale of the soldiers. The drumbeats fell like a rainstorm. Before Jiang Pingji could move, she suddenly caught a glimpse of a bullet screen. Her fingers trembled, and her perfect expression almost revealed a flaw. Xiangxia. Beating the drums on the battlefield. This is the same principle as playing dynamic music on a sports bike. Is it to stimulate the adrenaline? To defectio. To the previous poster, you're so naughty. How do you expect me to look directly at the background music of a sports bike? War drums indeed had the effect of stimulating morale, but it had another important meaning, which was to convey orders and warnings. Soldiers fighting was not like TV dramas. Everyone knew martial arts, and fighting was as fancy as dancing. They only knew the simplest movements. Without martial arts, they were not afraid. With so many of them working together to attack at the same time, their lethality was not weaker than that of a martial arts master. According to the different drum beats, they attacked together, defended together, and chased after the enemy together. After all, this was an era without mobile phones, wireless Bluetooth, or even electronic loudspeakers. Huang Song gave the order to attack, and the drummers increased their tempo and frequency, oppressing the enemy with their momentum. If they could break through the enemy's line of defense in one go and inflict heavy casualties on the enemy, the morale of the soldiers would continue to rise. The soldiers under Jiang Pingji's command also noticed the changes in the rear. The frontline soldiers were timid for a moment. Before they could react, the enemy had already pounced on them like wolves and tigers. Perhaps the injuries on his body were not fatal, but the enemy's stomp was enough to turn him into a bloody pulp. Seeing the situation, Jiang Pingji immediately changed her tactics and adopted a defensive formation to defend against the enemy. The morale on Huang Song's side was not stable. As long as Feng Zhu's army could not break through the rear, and the frontline soldiers could not defeat the enemy, the morale of Huang Song's army would definitely plummet over time. When the time came, Jiang Pingji would give the order to switch from defense to offense and destroy the enemy's psychological defense in one fell swoop. She was calm and unhurried, issuing military orders one after another. Sure enough, Huang Song's side could not gain any advantage. On the other side, Xie Zhe's side had also stabilized the situation. Not only did he not allow the enemy to advance any further, but he also forced them to retreat a little. Today's battle is of utmost importance. Xie Zhe shouted loudly, "I will live and die with you all." As he spoke, he took the lead and killed 2 enemies. The surrounding soldiers were greatly encouraged. Xie Zhe's martial arts skills were comparable to Li Yun's. Both of them gave it their all, but the odds of winning were 50-50. The long spear in his hand was like a part of his body. Under his control, a silver dragon-like light flashed in the air, piercing through flesh like lightning and taking away a few lives in an instant. After killing a few people, Xie Zhe gave several more orders in succession. The 2 sides were in a stalemate. It seemed that they were evenly matched, but Feng Zhu knew very well that as time went on, he would be the one who would lose. The army had set off from the front line of Wanzhou. Even though they had rested and reorganized halfway, the soldiers' bodies and spirits had not fully recovered. The enemy was different. Feng Zhu was thinking of countermeasures, but how could the battlefield be controlled by the wisdom of 1 or 2 people? Jiang Pingji observed the situation and suddenly said, "Bogeo is about to lose." Looking at the situation on the battlefield, she did not have much of an advantage. Even if Huang Song was going to lose, it was impossible for him to lose so quickly. At the same time, Yang Si crossed his arms, twirled his neatly trimmed beard and said, "Huang Song's momentum is lost." Han Yu nodded. Why were the 3 of them so sure? Because they had all heard that there was a problem with the rhythm of the enemy's drums. The pitch, rhythm, and density of the drumbeats all represented different meanings. Beating the drums to advance the troops, and stopping when the drums sounded. The enemy's drumbeats were clearly for an attack, but the enemy had the intention to retreat. This was a clear sign that their morale had plummeted. Apart from that, the drummers' morale was low, and they were distracted, so much so that the war drums made a few mistakes. This was fatal on the battlefield. Jiang Pingji saw that the timing was just right. She struck while the iron was hot, and gave the order to attack. For a moment, the army pounced on the enemy like a dam that had been opened. The war drums also became louder and more intense. With one side rising and the other falling, Huang Song's troops were even more disadvantaged. Huang Song's face was livid. He clenched his molars tightly, and the blue veins on his forehead bulged. At that moment, a general who was covered in blood rushed over on horseback. He had suffered serious injuries and almost fell off when he dismounted. "My lord, our front line has fallen." Huang Song closed his eyes tightly and said through gritted teeth, "Retreat! Retreat!" As soon as the order to retreat was issued, the soldiers who heard it hurriedly turned around and retreated. All of them only wanted to escape, which made it easy for the enemy who was chasing after them. Jiang Pingji's side pressed on with a spurt of energy and pursued the enemy. The number of corpses left behind by the enemy's retreat was almost equal to the previous losses. The front line won a great victory. Feng Ju, who was in the rear, was also affected and quickly fell into a disadvantageous position. Jiang Pingji's gaze was distant. Her left hand gently stroked the hilt of the god-slaying saber at her waist. After a while she said, "Summon Captain Jiang. Mobilize 5,000 troops and horses and follow me." When Yang Si heard this, his nerves tightened with a clang. Hanyu was a little slow to react. His lord was going to. "My lord, don't chase a cornered enemy." Yang Si widened his eyes and squeezed out the words that even he himself did not believe. "Take advantage of their weakness and kill them." Jiang Pingji sneered. "I only know how to beat a drowning enemy." When Jiang Nongqin received the news, she mobilized 5,000 elite cavalrymen without hesitation. No matter whether the Lord's orders were right or wrong, they were golden rules to her. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.